You're watching Medfield TV, community shows.
Welcome. This is the first meeting of 2018, Board of Selectmen, January 2. And we remind everybody that the meeting is being videotaped, recorded, and we always start with a moment of appreciation for our troops that are serving around the world. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So we're starting off with a school committee and permanent planning and building committee doing a presentation on the Dale Street School. Whoever is going to, if you're the one, Jeff. You just need to be at a microphone. That's the main thing.
All those papers he needs to podium.
I got a lot of papers here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We're really happy to announce, and we did it through email earlier in the month of December, that we were finally approved to be in the MSBA program after a few tries. MSBA, they ask you to do a statement of interest each year, and that statement of interest is about 50 or so pages, and we submit that. I think they received 82 statements of interest this year to look at. We made it down to the final 42 or so. They came out and visited us in August. They had a great meeting. Tim Bonfatti was there for the building committee and school committee, and Michael LaFrancesca and Steve Graham, the principal. And we took them around Dale Street, and they got to see, some of the things we've lived with for a lot of years. And, they were impressed with the fact that we've used about every usable space in that building, whether it's educated or used as storage. And they left saying, you definitely need a new building, but there are lots of issues that come up in terms of other communities that are asking for high schools, especially because they're so expensive. So they let us know that they would inform us somewhere around Thanksgiving. So we got the call the Tuesday after Thanksgiving asking us to come to the board meeting in early December, and they voted to approve us and enter us into the program. So that starts a whole multi-year process in which starts with a feasibility study that's required. So we are required as a district and to be into this program to do a feasibility study, and that's what we're looking to do as an article at the next town meeting in April, is to ask money for a feasibility study. That typically is going to last between 9 and 12 months. And through that feasibility study, they will be able to tell us, what options we have as a town and a school district in terms of renovating the existing school, which I can't imagine they'd have us do, and then look at different site placements within the town, whether or not, I think we're in a really good place here in Medfield because we have town-owned land that we can build a school at. Many communities during that feasibility phase are looking at purchasing additional land to build a school. And we're not in that situation, so we're fortunate in that regard. But they could tell us that they, looking at the area between the current Dale Street and the Memorial School would be a nice area, or what we have talked about behind the Wheelock School, or any other town area. So that's part of that feasibility, and then looking at the enrollment and the enrollment projections and what we look at for 5 or 6 or 7 years out in terms of enrollment. So that's all part of that study, and that's what we would be asking the town to support at town meeting. And I can go over some deliverable dates that they gave us, so that initial compliance certification is the due date and status required of that is May 2nd, 2018. The listing of the school building committee is due on June 1st. The educational profile questionnaire, which is something that we need to put together as a school district, July 2nd, 2018. The online enrollment projection is also due on July 2nd, 2018. Enrollment certification fully executed on October 1st, 2018. Maintenance and capital planning information, October 1st, 2018. Local vote authorization is required by December 28th, 2018. So what they do is they have a 270-day requirement, that local authorization on the feasibility study. So we're starting the date of April 2nd. So we have 270 days to that date to get that passed. Of course, the sooner the better for the construction process. And then feasibility study agreement, again, is also on December 28, 2018. And that whole eligibility period concludes in December 28th of 2018. So all that needs to be done prior to then. Any questions or anything I forgot, members of the building committee or school committee, or?
Jeff, the 270-day period, does that include the appropriation at town meeting for the entire project, or just the
No, just the
design?
feasibility. Just the
Just the feasibility?
Just the feasibility, yes.
Okay. And then, are you anticipating a separate vote for the design, or separate appropriation for the design and for the construction, or combining them all in one?
I think usually combined, Tim, is that what you?
Always combined.
Yeah.
Combined.
Basically, and just to clarify that, because it's a significant sum of money that's being asked for this feasibility study, it's not just the feasibility study, it's the feasibility study which, as Jeff mentioned, looks at whatever, many, typically 11 or 12 different options. But then, once you pick the preferred option, it's taking that option through about 30% of the design process. So it's the feasibility study and the schematic design process in this phase. And then once you do that, you'll have enough information under the program that you can get estimates that people can rely on, and you go to the town and you vote the total appropriation at that point. That's how the MSBA rules are.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One thing we'll be looking to do is, for the Board of Selectmen, is to appoint one of your members to what will be a new school building committee that's required by the MSBA, which has some sort of specific roles that are required, one of them being the top executive authority, which in Medfield is the Board of Selectmen. So at some point, either tonight or some other evening, we would just need someone from the Board of Selectmen to be appointed for that purpose.
Okay. Questions, Gus, Mike?
Had a minor one, Jeff.
Sure.
You mentioned the state, when they come in, they take a look at the locations. Do you know what the criteria, I know the idea I've heard has been the Wheelock School, but I'm just curious what the
So
state would.
through the feasibility study? So
Well,
that's an outside company that will determine, they look at the sites through that feasibility piece.
Okay, so it's not the state
Right.
weighing in, it's the.
Right,
okay.
right.
And is that partially funded by the state, or is that entirely funded
Yeah.
by the town?
That's reimbursable. as well.
Reimbursable.
Yeah.
Okay.
As I say 40%, Mike tells me 38.84, give or take, 39.84. That's right, that's right.
Well, I guess as a schools and as a building committee, haven't we pretty much settled on the site behind the Wheelock School as our first choice, or is that still up in the air?
And it's still,
I think it's important to note that when you enter this program, it's not, you can't predetermine where you're going to put the school. That's why it's 6 months of this feasibility study. So while that may be one of the sites we look at, as I said, there'll probably be 10 or 11 different options. And it's not the state that determines the site. It is the town. The town determines the site, and then they recommend to the state that based on all the due diligence they've done, this is the site that they want to go with, and then it is up to the state to approve it.
So the state at that point either agrees or disagrees, and if they disagree, basically, they tell us to look at a different site then?
We
Possibly.
would never propose a site that they wouldn't agree with, so we would go through a process that, iteratively along the way they're in on, and as long as the process is open and transparent and merit-based, then they generally, I've never seen them not agree with the town.
Yeah. So it's a discussion all the way along the line then?
Yes, yeah, right.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions for these folks?
What's the estimated cost of the feasibility study? How much will we be looking at for the town meeting this year?
Well, it's a feasibility study and schematic design, so we're looking at, that typically runs somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million.
So that's the amount for this year?
yes.
I think we'll be asking for, the 1.5 million, not to exceed that.
And then that 38% is then reimbursed from the state?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
I assume that's a bondable, potentially bondable project.
Yeah, and we do have, the best thing is if you can combine them with other projects that are going out for bonding anyway. So last year, the town approved $1 million for the Affordable Housing Trust that hasn't been borrowed yet. And then the water and sewer, I don't know possibly whether they'll be looking to bond money for next year. So if you can lump them together, you save on your bonding costs, because they can run about $80,000 or $100,000 for printing and legal services or whatnot. So, but yeah, and it's probably going to require a debt exclusion override also.
Is it a 20-year bond?
I don't believe on that you can do it 20 years if it's considered design. You know, design used to be considered 5 years. So I don't know whether the new Municipal Simplification Act, Modernization Act changed that, but if not, it probably would be a 5-year bond.
So if it was a 5, it would be about a $350,000 a year payment on a 5-year bond.
With the included interest,
They may
yeah.
have lumped it in, I'd have to look at the.
Yeah. I know if you combine the design funds with the construction funds, you can do that, you can include those all as 20 years, or 30 years even, you can go if you want to.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thanks, Pete.
Appreciate your coming.
Also, just want to thank the board. You know, we couldn't have gotten this far without your support on this, because as you know, I've had to come in front of you each year to get this statement of interest submitted. So just appreciate your support on this and also going forward. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sarah Raposa, who's going to talk to us about Medfield State Hospital 40R grant update and the McCabe contract update. Kathy McCabe is the consultant to the Medfield State Hospital Master Planning Committee.
Hi, so Brandy, our committee member, is actually here to speak to the contract additional services, but I'm here to speak to the grant, the 40R grant that we talked about last meeting. And I talked to Kurt Gertner at the state. He's the contact, and he works for the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and that's where the planning assistance grant was through. And he was glad that we talked when we did, because he was able to say that the grant application that I wrote was actually meant to be attached to the contract, the state contract that they'll be sending out this week. And in light of our conversation, he'll be a little bit more vague in the wording on that grant contract. So it'll, instead of 40R zoning and design guidelines, it'll be phrased as zoning and design guidelines. So that was kind of a good thing. Yep. So he wanted to, you know, he was, you know, surprised that there was so much concern, but these are things, local politics, things that we need to work through, and that's what we'll do. Yeah, and that means that we can pursue 40R proper or 40R something like that with the density that we would want to include in the zoning, but it doesn't have to be called 40R in order to accept the grant and use the grant. And there's definitely still that notion that whatever goes to town meeting at some point, it doesn't pass, and that's okay too, because that's just the nature of Massachusetts municipal zoning.
Does the match require a grant? I mean, does the grant require a match?
Zero match,
Zero match?
yeah. So, that's all I have to say.
And the committee will actually be,
Thank you.
right, we'll actually be voting on it at our next meeting, which occurs the 17th. Voting to accept it formally.
Yeah. Oh, no, it actually comes to
Do they need to?
the Board of Selectmen at your next meeting. So we'll get the draft contract this week, make sure that all of the references to 40R are not as prominent as they were in the title of our grant application. But it will be something that the selectmen will need to formally accept at your next meeting.
For what it's worth, the issue wasn't, if he came away with the impression that there's a lot of agitation over 40R, the real question was, what is it we're obligated to do? And if we don't, is the town backing up this contract that you're gonna use this grant to fund? And it sounds like the answer is no. You've got the grant, so.
Yeah.
that's Great.
Well, good.
But I'll be
Turn
over
it to
here while
me.
you.
So while Sarah brought in the money, I'm asking to spend the money. Happy New Year. Happy birthday, Gus. Okay.
That's my internet birthday.
Happy internet birthday. I have two requests tonight. The first is for authorization, a signature for our Phase 3. This is the third part of McCabe's contract, and it is in the amount of $22,500. This is the phase that we held off approving, and we are ready to go ahead with that. And the other portion is the $21,540, which are the additional service fees due to our additional meetings and various work we've asked McCabe to accomplish.
Any questions?
Sure. The first piece, the 22,500, is the amount
Yes.
that we've already approved.
Correct.
We already okayed that, so
Yes.
this is just official
That's been
paperwork.
allocated, we're
Okay.
just asking the selectmen now to sign.
Yeah, that's fine, okay. And then the second part is coming out of the grant. Got it, okay.
Yes,
We're
if
we're
that's
going
how
to
you'd-
spend it, and I assume the
Yes.
grant is reimbursable.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So we'll spend it out of the state hospital account, and then the grant will come in and we can reimburse that.
okay.
Any other questions? Thank you guys very much then.
You are most welcome.
Do you know whether the grant, the reimbursement can go back into the funds or whether it has to go to free cash?
I don't know.
You don't know? That's probably something we ought to check on to
We
make
can,
sure.
yeah, certainly check with the accountants tomorrow about the proper way to
Yeah.
set that up, because it is a reimbursement grant.
So I assume you'd be hoping to put the funds back into the original appropriation
I
rather
would
than
like
have
to
it.
put the funds back in the appropriation, because we've always said we'd leave approximately $15,000 in that amount for mediation for the roadway and any other environmental work at the site. So I would like
Okay.
to leave 15,000 in that.
Yeah, well, we better check on that right away, so.
And Brandy, one other question. Technically on the contract, the period of performance for this is out through the end of March.
Correct.
So the work plan, I assume, is that even if the town meeting were to move to May, the plan is to be ready for a town meeting in March. It's just that it may not be scheduled till May, as opposed.
Correct.
What I'm
And
really asking is, there won't be another request for
request
funding
for
out through April.
appropriations. I can see at least one item in here that we may be able to change into a meeting fee instead.
Okay.
Because if we don't have our special town meeting until May, I envision another meeting in there. Even if we're ready in March, it'll still be another preparation meeting.
And the reason I asked the question is because if the committee's not ready in March, then the town is probably not ready to schedule a special town meeting in May. It's kind of like you need to know
Right.
you're where you need to be, so,
Correct, and
Okay.
I envision us being ready for March.
okay,
It's just a matter of the ancillary
great.
meetings that have to go on instead. Yeah.
Thank you very much then.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
Our next appointment is at 7:30.
You have a motion to sign the contract or approve the contract?
Oh, yeah, yep.
So I would move that we approve and sign the contract as presented with the addendum.
And just a minor question, is it two signatures for both increments, or are they all bundled into a single increment? How many modifications are we signing? One or two?
You are signing one modification, and one is the Phase 3 amendment.
So we're signing two things. So there's two documents, a modification of the contract and a Phase 3 amendment.
Correct.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Right.
Yep.
Aye.
We've got 5 minutes before our 7:30 appointment, so that why don't we do some of these other things? Citizen comment, anybody sign up for, once again, we just have one citizen comment
It's
so
a new
far.
year. It's never going to be as good a time as right now.
Do you want to take Maurice Goulet, who's here? He's got a contract he's got a
Sure.
request to sign for.
Absolutely.
He's gonna have a few late nights coming up ahead of him, so if we can get him out of here early.
Thank you, thank you.
So the contract you have in front of you for the consultant to do, to act in the capacity of chief operator at the wastewater treatment plant. It's a temporary contract that as soon as we hire a full-time employee there, that contract would be terminated within 30 days. But right now, we're still looking to hire that full-time person. It's been a long year we went out 5 different times. Wastewater is, a lot of the elder statesmen are kind of fading away, and the new ones are trying to change over to different positions. So it's a problem across the Commonwealth right now for wastewater employees. So we are looking to do this in the interim. As soon as we hire a full-time employee, like I said, we would be, it was just a temporary contract to comply with DEP.
Any questions for Mo?
You just answered my only question. So, yeah.
So we have a motion then
Yep,
to,
I have a motion to approve and sign the contract for wastewater treatment plant chief operator services as requested by Mr. Goulet.
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep,
Thank you very much.
thank you, sir.
Well.
So maybe we can slip in a discussion of the annual town meeting warrant articles. Is that you, Mike?
Yes, I was just hoping that you might have had a chance to go through the articles and either delete or add or change any of the articles that were on that draft that I prepared for you.
3-minute discussion.
Yeah, this is gonna be more than a couple of minutes then, so why don't we do something else? Why don't we do the discussion of the senior housing survey? Is that a 3-minute one? Who brought this up?
I think we're just continuing that, given that we had an initial discussion last meeting. I think this is now kind of almost on old business, unless I don't think there's anybody in the audience that's
Ready to discuss it?
ready to discuss it. So the only stuff I have is the document that you saw from me at the last meeting. I forwarded that to Dick, Barbara, Jack, Randy, and Steve Nolan. I think all were on a kind of an interim distribution list. Barbara has tentatively scheduled a meeting for Blue Moon at 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon, pending how good a job the highway department, it's too bad Mo's gone. How good a job the highway department does with whatever snow we get. So they're beginning the conversations. Happy to help, but you've also been in discussions, and I basically said I think I've exhausted all my expertise, so.
Yeah, and I have no expertise in it,
Well,
so.
I didn't either, but it's exhausted for sure now.
And when you're going through your list of warrant articles, you should note there are 5 articles on the warrant pertaining to senior housing.
Yep.
1 submitted by the Senior Housing Study Committee and 4 submitted by citizen petition.
Which one's the Senior Housing Study Committee? I thought they all were.
That was the one that authorizes the transfer and use of the Hinckley property for senior affordable housing in the 300 to 450,000
price
range. Yeah, yeah.
So really, then there's the additional one that we're working on, that Sarah and COG and Mark are putting together.
Well, we need to decide what's going in there, and that's why I've got this list for you, because we've got different versions from different groups, and you have to decide which one is going to go in the final warrant that goes to print. It's going to get very confusing if you got 5 articles in the
But I don't-
petition
we
one.
can't, we can't reject the citizen petition, though.
No, you
No,
cannot.
you have to persuade them to withdraw.
Right. So I think, I mean, that we should have, I had understood that the one that was on there was the one that Sarah and Cog and McCabe and Mark are working on, in terms of one that the Board of Selectmen will put forth.
I believe it came from the Senior Housing Study Committee, that
And
one.
then we need
so-
to add one.
we need
because
to
I think
Okay.
we need to have the article
So
that
that'll-
we support, and that is
Okay.
crafted legally and properly.
So that'll be a 6th article.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so if the Senior Housing Study Committee, if they're gonna put forward, as is their right as a town committee, to put something on the warrant, but we needed a separate article on that topic, that would be the one that we sort of,
Okay,
agree
and
that we're gonna go ahead with.
who'll be responsible for drafting that so I can
Sarah
get it?
and Cog have met on that several times. I had probably a 5 email exchange with Courtney Starling from Cog over last week about this. You sent me an email about it last week. So some combination of Sarah, and really it's an issue of legality with the state that Cog is working out with the state. And so I think Cog is the principal drafting group, draft person, draft company, but Mark is obviously gonna have to bless it from a legal standpoint. And
Okay,
I think we want to have something that will effectuate this proposal from the Senior Housing Study Committee, to give the town meeting a fair chance to say yes or no on this concept, in a way that if they say yes, it can be implemented, it'll be legal, it won't be mired in litigation or disputes or what have you. And so that's being drafted by that group. And I had thought this Article 21 on here was kind of the proxy for that, but it's fine if we just add another one that would be the kind of, this is the Board of Selectmen article on the Hinckley property, which ultimately is trying to implement or provide a vehicle for the implementation of the Medfield State Hospital Master Planning Committee's recommendation for that site.
okay. It just would be helpful to have a responsible party to submit the article so that I get it
Yeah,
in time
I
to
mean,
put it in the warrant.
I mean, if you want to put somebody, I think it's COG is going to be drafting it. Community Opportunity Group.
COG?
Yeah, Roberta and Courtney.
Okay.
I mean, they met with Sarah at the beginning of December and Kathy McCabe to make sure they were kind of on the same page, and Courtney is working with.
Sarah can be the liaison on it.
Yeah, Sarah is the liaison on it. She has been working on it, and they are trying to work out with the state the parameters for the proposal that will pass state muster at the disposition phase.
Okay.
So, which I don't know.
So do we know if that group has reached out to the citizens who put in the citizen petitions that
No,
are
they
apparently going to fail?
They haven't.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think this is we've been working on it from the perspective of the Affordable Housing Trust with this issue, kind of to put together an affirmative article that would effectuate this. The citizen petition folks can decide what they're gonna do with it
Yeah,
afterwards.
but apparently their petition are all going to fail according to Mark, so.
Yeah, I mean, we can let them know that, but I don't think it's not up to, it's up to us to talk to them. It's not up to the Community Opportunities Group to talk to them. The Community Opportunities Group is putting
Right.
together, effectuating this, but I think at some
It
point we
might
ought
make
to
sense.
schedule a meeting with the Senior Housing Study Committee sometime in January to talk all this through, once the article is prepared that we're gonna put
But
forward.
if we've got 5 citizen petition and a senior housing study committee article for the annual town meeting that are all legally flawed, as Mark has indicated, that somebody should talk to them about that, so
Oh,
that,
I agree. We should have a meeting. I think we should have them in here, just kind of talk through all the stuff and see if we can, once they see the article that we're gonna put on there. I think part of it is, since that's not fully written yet, and through no fault of the folks who are working on it, it's just that they've had a lot of issues to deal with the state, to try to get the state to understand what the proposal is and kind of work through all those details. So, maybe.
work in progress then.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
work in progress, but it is being drafted, it is being put together.
The problem, just so you understand the big picture, as far as the moderator's authority, if there's a procedural impediment, the moderator can declare it out of order and it doesn't go to vote at all. However, a substantive legal issue, unless we can persuade the citizenry that it's illegal, it goes to vote one way or the other, and then it's up to the AG to say anything.
Mark, if the articles, this is, I think, more theoretical curiosity than where we're actually going to be, but given that those articles that were submitted are all various variations on the same theme, and I think even the petition signatures are the same, largely the same group of people signed all of the articles. If I recall, somewhere I read that there's more than just a one article at a time voting process. You can have a collection of articles like this that are all geared to doing the same thing. And I think you vote for the one you like or something like that. And then there's also a format in the articles that can go, if you pass this one, then you go to the next, or, there's a sequence. There were
Well,
two different, I would just,
That's the procedural aspect.
Right,
It's within
right.
the moderator's discretion, and
Okay.
we have town meeting time as a guide.
yeah,
So there's no hard and fast answer. It comes down to his discretion, how he wants to take them up.
okay.
Obviously, it may be that the determination would be that if one passed, whichever, suppose there could be one that is,
Thank you.
for instance, the one that you're proposing, it may moot out the others, and therefore, it would have consequences that way.
And the numbering on the warrant articles isn't firm yet, so if you take a look at those and you decided there's a particular way you'd like to number them so that they will come up in a order that makes some sense in terms of town meeting votes, then let me know on that too.
It would make sense for our article to come first, I think.
Probably,
Well, the
yeah, it's
understanding
likely,
with the
yeah.
moderator, that if that they're a group, and that's
Yeah.
probably, again, going back to what he's done in the past, these are all related.
Take them all together,
And
yeah.
if one gets called, we're gonna take them up as a group, and the selectmen will go first.
Yeah, because what happens on ours might obviate the rest of them, so.
And will that be selectmen or will it be the affordable housing?
I think it would be the
Us,
selectmen.
selectmen.
It's town- Disposition of town land, to the Hinckley property.
Okay.
So, I think that's who would.
So now it's time for our 7:30 appointment with the Medfield State Hospital Building and Grounds Committee, but I don't see anybody.
John Thompson is not here yet.
So why don't we
I
go
did
on
just
then?
check that he had confirmed he was coming, so maybe we can hold that until he
Sure.
shows up, otherwise I can
Yep.
just give you a brief update at the end of the meeting.
Okay. So, Mike, do you want to do your warrant articles then, at this point?
Well, I think Chief Meany would love if you took him first.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Chief,
You're gonna have some late nights too.
you're not
yeah.
supposed to talk in for another 7 minutes.
You're not until 7:45, chief.
You're
Sorry.
forcing us to be ahead of schedule again. We worked hard to be behind schedule for the 7:30.
I can't help it. So these are some very straightforward requests regarding my being able to request lists from civil service. I think one, Mr. Peterson, you've got a form there to sign that just indicates that the two of the recruits that were appointed have started the academy, so, but I can't sign it and Mr. Sullivan can't sign it, so
Okay,
that
I'll
needs to be
sign it
the
then.
chair, so that's one. And
What about the third one? Is the third one?
so the third one is, did not fulfill all the requirements in order to enter the academy. So that would be, item 2, would be to allow me to, with your approval, to request a list so I can hire that vacancy. No additional people, just that vacancy. And then I'll give you the second one, and you may want to do them both at the same time. There's also a sergeant's vacancy by the retirement of Sergeant Lorna Fabo. We've given the exam has been certified by civil service, so I have a list, but again, you folks need to vote to allow me to request the list from civil service. So one signature and 2 list requests, nothing of which I can do any action on. You have to do the promotions and the hiring, so this is a procedural matter that just allows me to get my hand on a list.
So, and pardon my ignorance on.
No, that's
this.
okay, it's not easy stuff sometimes.
With respect to the list from civil servants for the sergeant's vacancy, would that potentially include internal promotions, or is that just kind of the list of all the people in the state, or who's on the list?
Strictly internal
Internal,
promotions.
okay.
Yep, all internal people.
Okay.
Yep,
So you'll request from civil service a list of internal people who took the civil service test?
correct,
see.
yep. And you'll hire one from that.
And then for the patrol officer vacancy, this is the same process that we used for the other 2 that
Correct.
moved ahead?
It'll
Okay.
be on a conditional appointment based on a series of steps and hurdles a person has to go through. And then hopefully that person gets to the point of the document that Mr. Peterson is going to sign, saying that we actually hired those 2 when they were in an academy.
So given the incongruity of what you just said about us asking the civil service for a list of our own internal candidates, does it make sense for us to be in civil service, or are there good enough good things for it that we should be continuing it, or should we be looking to get out of it eventually?
Eventually, you're gonna wanna get out of that.
Okay.
And we would probably do that at the same time as we're doing the next contract. It's usually an item for negotiation with the contract. That contract doesn't expire until a year from this June, so we have another year on the contract, so we're gonna have to do it till then. What that allows you to do is 500 people can come and take an examination that Medfield gives. They pay their fee, so it doesn't cost the town to do anything for it, and then we pick from from those who pass. So you get a much larger cross-section of people to pick from. You can do a lot better on being able to, if we want to work on hiring, women, minorities, people with special skills, such as an alternative language and whatnot, you have more flexibility to do that. With the civil service, we have one opening, got 3 names.
You do have to come out the same way you went in. I don't know how it was done here in the first place,
Right.
whether it was a ballot or it was a town meeting, but whatever.
You do the same thing to get out, okay.
That's what you have to do to.
But we first have to bargain it with the police and get them on board first?
My opinion, that's correct.
Okay.
Probably at least an impact bargaining situation. A lot of, it's being done on a widespread basis right now.
Matter of fact, the sergeant's exam that we gave, civil service in recognition of the difficulties they have with their examinations when they have a 75 and 80% failure rate, and these are not stupid people taking the exam, allowed us to hire an individual who created an exam for us based on criteria that I set down, and then they went through an assessment center, again, based on real-life things that happen in Medfield, the laws I encounter in Medfield, our policies and procedures. So instead of 25 questions being on Massachusetts constitutional law and powers of arrest, and the other 50 randomly coming out of some roughly 2,000 pages of textbook, where if you didn't see the graph on the lower left corner of page 437, well, you're going to get that question wrong. So I took those for years and years and years. It was slightly a contribution to my hair loss. No matter how hard you try, if you didn't see that page, you don't get that answer. So this is a much better way to do it, and that's how we did the sergeant's exam. Went over, was corrected within 2 weeks, certified by civil service within 3 weeks, as opposed to taking it in October, and you might have a certified list by March.
And as far as the officers, civil service developed way before collective bargaining. So collective bargaining has totally superseded protections and all.
They don't need the protections, in
Right,
other words.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so I
Thank
would
you.
move that we authorize the chief to request the civil service lists for a patrol officer and for a sergeant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you,
Stay warm.
chief.
Awesome.
So we can't do the town meeting warrant articles because the town administrator has disappeared. So
That,
do you guys,
Verizon access agreement, that's just a perfunctory.
okay.
If you're gonna do that, I've gotta recuse myself from that. So I'll recuse myself. Let me know you got.
Because you live near the tower, or because you use Verizon?
Mike, are you going to talk to us about the Verizon access agreement?
I am.
Oh, on the Medfield State Hospital water tower. Mark?
So we've been in protracted negotiations with them over the installation of the wireless facility on the water tower. Your engineers have looked at the plans and all, and at the last minute, they determined that there was some environmental history up there that they wanted to do a due diligence before they committed to. particularly where they have to construct something on the ground. So this is an access authorization for them to go in and do this environmental testing pursuant to for their own purposes.
So we're not actually to the point of getting money out of them for
Well,
the rental.
we need to get this out of the way.
Yeah,
We basically are poised, the legal lease has been agreed to. The engineers have more or less gone over our engineers' concerns, and they're kind of in agreement. So this, with any luck, this will come together fairly shortly once this is out of the way,
okay.
this being this environmental evaluation.
The amount incidentally is 40,000 for the first year, and then it goes up, I believe, 3% a year each year after that. One of the, oh no, it's a, I believe, 10-year contract with 2 5-year options to renew. And the water and sewer.
10 years, Mike, or 10 years and then 2 5-year options beyond that?
10 years and 2 5-year options, so 20-year total. And the Water and Sewer Board wants to put out an additional RFP because there is space for additional carriers on top of the tower, and they would like to generate as much money as possible to help pay for the water and sewer capital improvements that are coming down the road, painting the Mount Nebo Water Tower, the iron manganese treatment facility, and then there's some other longer range projects, replacing cast iron pipe and changing the water meters. State wants you to change the water meters every 10 years. Obviously, very few communities are complying with that, but you do have to change them periodically, and there are much more effective methods these days where you can do it from a tower, you know, a cell tower. And used to be, right now, they drive by and do radio reads, I believe. But you can do it by telephone, you can do it by a tower that reads them within a certain radius. So. And one of the things they would like to consider in that too is whether it would make sense to go to quarterly billing instead of semi-annual billing, so that people don't get the shock of the water bills. So
I have one broad question, and it doesn't specifically, it's not going to change what we're doing with this contract, but I happened to get into a discussion 6 months ago around this, and I'm curious whether we've thought about it and we know what we're doing in terms of deliberately doing it. This is a Verizon contract, the revenues of which will go to the water and sewer, presumably, I guess, the Water Enterprise Fund.
yeah.
The issue is, so if the highway department wanted to put up an antenna, would the revenue go to the highway department? Would the council on aging? What's our policy in terms of, I'm not trying to get this particular decision changed because it's a separate enterprise fund, but the discussion I got into had to do with when you have an asset in a department which has a purpose to serve the department, and the fact is that you've figured out another way to generate revenue off that asset. How do we automatically know, or do we automatically know where that money goes?
I think the distinction, as you pointed out, is that this is this is an enterprise fund, a water enterprise fund. The highway department is part of the general fund, and that would be the difference. Although I will tell you this, the Mount Nebo Water Tower, the revenue from that has been going to the general fund because at the time the decision was made to purchase the Holmquist land down on Plain Street without an override, using the revenue generated from the Mount Nebo Water Tower leases. And
this time, water and sewer, the particular board asserted itself that they wanted the revenue from if there was going to be a facility on their water tower, then they wanted the revenue.
Well, of course they did. And I'm not trying to drive to an answer, but because I got into this rather intriguing discussion, when this 6 months ago, it suddenly said, well, how, and it's good you're here, you know, what if the schools have a cell tower with the revenue, or, you know, maybe the answer is, well, we've never thought about it and we don't know. But if there's a policy or something,
Well, there's
it
some
was a good time to
cases
ask the
where they actually, boards and commissions have care, custody, and control of property.
Yeah.
And it would flow from that. So hypothetically, you could put solar panels on the schools and the proceeds would be for their benefit.
Mhm.
Because that's under their care, custody, and control.
Okay,
And this, the water and sewer, which originally was it was statutorily created as an independent board.
Mhm.
And the charter only made them appointed rather than elected, so they are kind of a quasi-independent
Mhm.
group. Park and Rec falls into that category, so it depends who it is. DPW would not, because they're simply a town department.
okay. Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Massaro. Can you use a microphone, Bill? Well, some people watch us on recorded.
Bill, the Board of Selectmen meetings have never been dead.
No comment. I'm only asking this question because I had been involved with DCAM's efforts to put an antenna on the old water tower. Having read the contractual documents that they were getting ready to issue and sign for the lease of the old water tower, all of the terms and conditions that I could see were more concerned with protecting the equipment that was going on the tower than it was with the tower. So I'm going to assume that whatever this contract with Verizon is has adequate protections for the tower itself.
There's been a couple of engineering studies done. There was a back and forth between the water department's engineers and Verizon's engineers. They've been negotiating who's going to oversee it, what type of welding will be used, what type of paints will be used. So there's been a great deal of attention paid to that particular question.
And the short answer is yes, that originated as a lease that I prepared for Mount Nebo. It went over to Franklin, we used it in Franklin, and I had input from our DPW there, over there, to beef up the language. And so it's a strong pro-protective town lease at the moment. The most critical thing is, frankly, which we learned in Franklin, because there was earlier leases before I got there, if you have to paint, for instance, you have to be able to take the stuff off, and you don't want it to be at your expense. And they may even have to interrupt their service, and again, you don't want that to be at your expense. So this lease says to the carriers, you need to cooperate fully, and if we need to, for maintenance or whatever, it's at your expense, no expense of the town. So I'm very comfortable with the language.
And I would think that the liability for damaging the equipment were
Yeah,
the
there's a
town
whole
to take it
separate
off
thing.
is worse.
Contaminating water supply, there's all kinds of protections in there.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, anything else on this then?
So at this stage, we're not actually approving the contract yet because there's still this pending.
No, this is just
environmental-
an access license, really.
Yeah.
So do you want to make a motion to approve the access license for the
They've already
21D
signed it.
investigation?
You have an electronic copy that was sent to us with their signature on it, so.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the license to provide Verizon with access to the water tower.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor? Yep.
And they'll need to sign that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Now,
think
shall we
both
do-
parties are anxious to get going on that too, particularly water and sewer, so if you could sign it before you leave tonight. we
Sure,
could-
absolutely. Mike, how many cell tower contracts do we have? This is the first one at the State Hospital.
Yes, we
Water
have
tower.
3 on Mount Nebo.
Yeah.
We have T-Mobile, AT&T, and Sprint.
So we're getting about 100,000 out of that per year?
About 120,000.
Yeah, good.
So, and then 40,000 from this, so it's about 160,000 total. There are a couple of others. Sam White has about 7 carriers on his tower up by his operation there off North Meadows Road. And there are also whip antennas on the Boston Edison line that crosses 27 down near the Walpole line.
Yeah. There was some that we authorized here on 109 too, I know, on telephone
I
poles.
don't believe those have ever gone in.
They never
but
did?
I don't think
Okay.
there's any revenue from those anyway. That's,
No, we couldn't charge for them, apparently.
That could be controversial if, if they're pressing for deregulation at the federal level, they might say they have the right to put them up, and
There's all
We
kinds
can't.
of stuff going on in Washington right now.
about that, yeah. So I wouldn't count that revenue yet.
So I think putting out the RFP for more carriers is a great idea, but my memory is that when we talked about doing that before, that basically the carriers just decide when they're gonna,
Well, the
when they
problem,
need a site, and then they go looking.
it's a function of the economy and the industry, and there was huge expansion, then there was contraction, and then for a while there was expansion and new carriers coming in with getting income from, I assume, private equity or something, because God knows where they were getting the funding from. And then now it's consolidated again, so it's very hard to predict what kind of demand you'll get, unless you've got a really critical location.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to put out a.
Right, no downside.
Yeah. Dave Maxon's been very helpful to us in that regard, because
He was
he's
the
on
one that
top
said
of
that
it.
it didn't make any sense to put it out an RFP, but.
Yes, and he has a pulse on what's going on in that industry, so he could advise you whether it's a good time to do it, or whether it'd be better to wait 6 months or what, so we rely on his judgment on that to a great extent.
Yeah, we might as well ask him. But again, it doesn't hurt to do it, so. If you
Although
find
you don't
something-
want to put it out too many times and have no responses, because then it looks like you're dealing with a failure, or, you're trying to sell a bad apple or something, so,
Yeah, but if they happen to later need that apple, they'll come looking for us regardless, I think.
yes,
I
yeah.
mean, that's what David Maxim told us, I think, before, which is that when they need the site, they'll find you.
Yeah.
Pete, do you want to see if there's anybody here on the, even though John Thompson's not here, see if there's anyone here on the trail run or the Charlie Harris or any of those? I don't know if.
Anyone in the audience?
Well, I work with Kendra.
Okay.
On the trail run, yeah.
I just didn't want you to stay until the end and then they took it out because she wasn't sure she was sending somebody.
Yeah.
I can give you a brief update in
Okay.
John's absence.
All right.
Kendra and Nulik came to us, from the State Hospital Building and Grounds Committee proposing, a road race on May 5th. The Building and Grounds Committee voted to support it. At the time, we were concerned there was, some discussion we were having with another movie company to come back around that same time. They've since chosen another site, so I talked to John last week and we let Kendra know that we would be willing to move forward on the race if you approved it with the appropriate insurance.
The course doesn't run through any buildings, right?
No. And that question was asked.
Any other questions?
I would move that we approve the request for the 5K trail run on May 5th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Thanks for coming. Do we want to take up the other two things about the hospital?
Sure. Actually, I'm gonna hold, Charlie Harris, because I know he wants to come make a presentation to you with John about that.
Okay,
And then John had put forth, a request for funding. At the last meeting John was at, you had said any additional funding at the state hospital that would come out of the revolving fund would need your approval. John would like approval for, $17,500 for a fall cleanup. Obviously, we're in January now. So he wanted to have some discussion about whether or not we wanted to do that as soon as the site, was clear of snow, but that was before the impending snowstorm on Thursday. So I'm gonna ask that we hold that until I talk to John about maybe including that in the next, landscaping contract as a spring cleanup. But if he has if he has additional information, I'll have him come to your next meeting to talk to you about it.
So this document looks like we spent $17,500 for a fall cleanup that took place in November.
That's requesting the fall cleanup. We did not actually spend it. That was, we hadn't
I see,
signed it,
I
yeah.
see.
They sent us a proposal. They wanted to do it in November and we had held off and then it snowed and we held off further.
I got it.
so we can let John know that we took care of his fall cleanup needs by ordering snow to cover the property and make it look pretty.
And save the town $17,500.
Absolutely.
I'll talk to him about it.
So now I think we're down to the annual town meeting warrant articles, Mike. You wanted to go through those.
I'm sorry, which item are you on now?
Annual town meeting warrant articles.
Oh, okay, yeah. If anybody doesn't have a copy, I have some extras here if anyone needs one. Okay. We can go through these quickly and let me know if you want them deleted, changed, added to. The first several are
Is this
sort of
changed?
routine articles. What?
Has it changed since December 19th?
This is the same, right?
The perpetual care, the acceptance of town report. The Article 4, last year we had a whole bunch of articles on that because we had to vote to adopt each separate fund. This year, because of the Municipal Modernization Act, you only have to put one article voting the amount for each fund. These figures aren't set in stone yet. For example, the ALS committee, we're not sure what they'll be looking for to expend out of that fund.
These are limits anyway.
They're not appropriations technically, they're authorizations, and they're reservations upon the receipts that will cover those authorizations. So the hospital revolving fund, that will come mostly from the movie revenues and the auto show and events they have up there that where there's a rental fee. And the other funds are fairly routine. I did have to go up on the community gardens revolving fund because they were actually spending more than the annual appropriation, but because they hadn't spent it prior years, there was funds left over. Okay, there's an unpaid legal bill, Article 5. That has to do with the assisted living up next behind the Peak House. The legal fees for the conservation. Mark, do you have any comment on that, or?
The firm that Peg Stolfer is currently with, their billing department is out on the West Coast and basically dropped the ball in terms of not getting the bills in within, prior to the expiration of the fiscal year, so, last July 1, so.
And
So Mark, we pay them without actually having authorization or pay it, I mean, they're not big bills, but I'm just curious.
We don't pay them.
So
They
we
came
haven't
in
paid them?
after the fact, and I basically said, okay, we can pay you for the current bills going forward.
Yeah,
These other ones, you're gonna have to wait for a town meeting action.
okay.
And it's like,
And it takes an 8/10 vote at
Right.
an annual town meeting and a 9/10 vote at a special to appropriate those funds for prior year bills, so. Article 6 is similar, except I don't have the amount yet from the sewer department. That will come out of the sewer enterprise fund surplus. And that's a bill that goes back, I think, a year or so before. I think it goes back before most time. Article 7, weights and measures, that was, the sealer weights and measures thought he should submit his reimbursement on a calendar year basis instead of a fiscal year basis. So when he submitted the bills, the fiscal year had closed and the accountant wouldn't pay, so it's just a matter, it's only $82, so. Article 9 is and we've had these every year for the past several years, the medical bills. The problem, the hospitals or the service providers often don't submit the bills to the police department for payment until well after the close of the fiscal year, so the chief has to put an article in to a prior year bill. Okay. Article 9 is routine, setting the salaries of elected officials. Article 10 is amendment to personnel classification plan. Personnel board hasn't made any decisions on that yet, Chris? Okay. Article 11 is the operating budget. Article 12 is the capital budget. And I believe, Chris, the capital budget this year will include recommendations from Jerry McCarty's 20-year capital plan.
I believe so.
So
The
norm-
selectmen still hadn't finished finalized a discussion of how we were going to pay for all of that, since our normal capital budget's only about 350,000, so.
Well, I think we have to, he has to finish that work
Yeah.
first. He's got 4 more buildings to do. And we need Mo Goulet's, road pavement management plan. And then he's also working on fleet management software as well for the vehicles as well, right? And so,
Yes.
I think once you have the 3
Well,
of those.
I don't think the vehicle plan will be done for this
The
year.
vehicle plan's not going to be done for this year.
Yeah, so it'll
When
just
Jerry
be,
presented, I specifically asked him if he was gonna have numbers for this April and came away with the impression that he needs another year. So
Yeah.
you may
Yeah.
know more about that than I do.
I think he does have some items that are included in that plan that have become priority items that have failed. So I think you will see some of those items, and there are large ticket items be included in the capital budget this year.
Right. I mean, this is, obviously, I've brought this up before, but I think once we get those planning things in, I think we should have a discussion about the overall capital budgeting process, because I think we're gonna be doing this on a 5 or a 10-year schedule of mixed sources of funding. I think we have to figure out, for some of these things, I think we're gonna have to do some debt exclusions as we kind of plan out the costs, and then others we can try to do within the tax levy
yeah.
as well. So I think that's gonna be, this ties into the goals that you drafted. But kind of one of the goals that I would have for the next year would be, once those plans are completed or the analysis is completed, to then develop a longer-term
Financing.
capital, what the financing, proposal would be, and so to try to smooth it out.
Yeah.
And maybe.
The mechanics of the process for this upcoming fiscal years, Jerry may have some things he's gonna put in, but it's gonna feel a lot like we
Yes.
have in capital budget.
Right, I think this will be maybe we'll transition to something a little different after this year. This will be sort of the same.
Now, anything that requires bonding is done as a separate article, because it has to be submitted to bond council and approved, so even though it might be part of the capital budgeting process, if it involves bonding, it will be a separate article.
Right.
Okay, so you can expect probably a big increase in that, because it's encompassing a lot more, and probably it will encompass some of the things like Chapter 90 money, water and sewer enterprise money, perhaps, I don't know, we'll see. But it will be a little bit different, I presume, than what you've seen in the past with the $350,000 capital budget, so.
If it includes those other things, so the number will be bigger, but the revenue sources will also be bigger, is what you're saying?
They better be, because from
That
what
was
I've
what I
seen,
was thinking.
from what I've seen already, the money isn't there, so I don't know where it's coming from. But, okay, master plan, that's the committee that was appropriated, was appointed 2 years ago by the town meeting. I believe they're gonna be looking for $150,000 to complete the master plan. Mike Quinlan is chair of that committee. The park and recreation facility, I don't have a figure from them yet. I think that's something you're gonna have to meet with Park and Rec to discuss how that should proceed, because particularly with the school project coming online with $1.5 million, I don't know if you're gonna be able to, how you're gonna deal with the next 2 articles, in fact, because Article 15 is looking for a similar funds for an addition to the center at Medfield, so.
So the question, I guess, for us that I had on this for both Articles 14 and 15, are we at the point where we were waiting to hear recommendations from the Permanent Building Committee about things like this, or is that not something that's in place yet?
I think the intention was that any building project over a certain amount, it wasn't just a repair, would have to go before the Permanent Building Committee. Now, they wanted to get a mission statement adopted for.
That was a bylaw, I think it was
a bylaw.
44.
44, okay. So,
That's wrong, but there's a draft bylaw.
43.
Is it 43?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, Okay, so that would define what their responsibilities are. I assume that would require that any board or commission that wanted to pursue a capital building project would have to go before them.
Yeah, there's a draft, we last talked about it on October 17.
So my question on 43 was, given that it's called the Permanent Building, Planning and Building Committee, I was curious why we needed that article at all to say it's permanent. Is it, I didn't understand why 43 was a necessary article in the first place.
Well, it's
Right now-
permanent in that it's a permanent committee, but they're looking to define their responsibilities.
Right now, they're created by a vote of the selectmen, and we can disband them if we
Right.
wanted to.
Yep.
They're looking to have it added to the town bylaws as sort of a defined required committee, like the Board of Water and Sewerage.
I see.
So it'll be built into the bylaws, because right now, whatever the process is for the permanent building committee, we define.
Mhm.
So we could decide just to ignore them and go ahead and do something without their advice if we chose. And I think what they wanted to do was build in kind of the process that we've been using, over the last decade or so. But a lot of towns have it built into their bylaws.
Even charters.
Or in charters, as far as defining the process by which town departments can get buildings built, being right kind of in the fundamental governing law of the town.
So give them actual authority,
For over what?
the process.
Over municipal buildings.
So this is helpful. So this is an article that takes the discretionary power, moves it off of the Board of Selectmen and formalizes it with the Permanent Building Committee.
No, we'd still have the same power, but it would require their input on all of it.
I think this
Well,
provides for you to appoint the members, as I recall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it doesn't, but it sounds like this would, I'm really not taking a position here. I just want to understand why this was important in the
It's
first place.
basically to say, it's permanent, let's make it permanent, it's gonna really exist in the town bylaws as opposed to an ad hoc committee. It's gonna be a standing committee, if you will. Here's its powers, here's its makeup, here's its process, and that's what this draft is.
So I don't think we need to take time now, but I would like to know the underlying issues that drove the recognition of this being
I think
necessary.
part of the underlying issues are Article 13 and 14, or 14 and 15.
Because any town board has the authority to put an article on the warrant, any town board can, or citizen petition, absent this bylaw, can simply put, as these boards have
I see.
done, put a building on the warrant, try to argue at town meeting.
Okay.
And what this is sort of doing is formalizing the process of, whether it's the process that the Board of Selectmen has tried to impose, but there's no legal ability to impose.
So, got more to do with that. So, my thought on both 14 and 15, rather than that we need to sit down with the Parks and Rec, my reaction is, no, Parks and Rec and Council on Aging need to sit down with the Permanent Building Committee, because we're gonna know, I would think, personally, I would wanna know what they are saying about this, rather than have us be the point of the spear, having the first conversation.
Right.
Well, I think what the Permanent Building Committee has intended to do, particularly now that they've finished the town garage and the public safety building and are working on the Dale Street, is to see what else is out there pending for capital building projects and to try to prioritize them.
So
Which they did before. They actually did that several years ago.
Mhm.
And were quite successful, and, they put the town garage ahead of the public safety building, for instance, which was unusual.
Mhm.
And, but that worked, and the public safety building then came along, and then it was, obviously the Dale Street School would be next in priority. And then probably, they have Park and Rec, they have the Council on Aging.
So here's where I'm coming from on this, and this is just a conversation at this point. The one thing I wouldn't want to see happen is that by making this permanent and formalizing it, we also make permanent the mindset that says all buildings the town puts up must be funded through taxpayer levies. And I'm particularly thinking with Parks and Rec. This particular article, looking for the money to do the upfront design work, makes sense to me that the town would pay for that. I personally, this is strictly a personal position I took actually before I ever even ran for selectman, is I went to Parks and Rec and said, I think you should build this building with private funds. So the thing I wouldn't want to see is the Permanent Building Committee working off of an assumption that we approve or don't approve buildings based on our projection for the town's financing profile, where there might be a possibility that says, look, you can build it, but you gotta pay for it through private funds rather than having it be on the town. So
The
second-
decision as to where the money comes from is ultimately the town meetings, because they're the appropriating body.
I understand that.
And they can appropriate from a variety of sources, including private gifts or donations.
That's all fine. What I'm getting at is if you had a permanent building committee that was formally enshrined here, if they're saying, no, we recommend against this, but part of what was behind that decision was an assumption that you have to fund it through the town tax levy, I wouldn't want us to
Well,
automatically fall into that.
when I addressed this draft, my take was that the selectmen still needed to be the ultimate authority, and therefore I tweaked language here that made it clear that anybody proposing something would make application to the Board of Selectmen, and they would refer it to the Building and Planning Committee, so.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't speak at all to how things are funded. So it's really just saying that we're gonna have, for example, we have a water and sewer board
Yeah.
that exists by town charter and statute. We can't choose to get rid of it.
Mhm.
We have a Parks and Recreation Commission, we can't choose to get rid of it.
Mhm.
Right now, we can choose to get rid of the permanent building.
I see.
Right?
Okay,
So
okay. Yeah, I
this
got
would
it.
simply take what we think, what I think is the process that we all think is the right process.
Yeah.
They should
Okay.
be both planning future projects, and so I think the bylaw requires them to update a capital building plan every 5 years.
Mhm.
And then vetting all projects, and so that you would not be able to get do an end run around the permanent building committee if it's enshrined in the bylaw.
Okay.
That's
Thank
what
you.
they're hoping to get.
One issue along these lines to keep in mind, you heard the superintendent earlier say that School Building Assistance Authority requires that a school building committee be appointed. And when they went through it, there's 12 people on it, which is kind of a large committee to work with. It includes the superintendent of schools, a school committee member, a selectman, town administrator, principal of the high school, somebody with construction or architectural experience. You go through a whole litany, and it's really too large a committee, I think. So the discussion is, even though you've got that committee set up, but you're required to do it, can they delegate the Permanent Planning and Building Committee, which is a 5-member committee, and has people with construction experience and project management experience on it, is probably much more suited to actually oversee the design process and construction process. So that's an issue that you're probably gonna have to deal with, and the school committee's gotta wrestle with it too, whether they wanna go that way or not, and whether the school building will let them, so.
So the superintendent did say that we needed to appoint a selectman to that committee?
Yes, that's the 12-member
So do they need us to do that
committee.
tonight, or is that something we can do at our next meeting?
No, you can do that anytime in the
Okay.
next few months. You know, I don't think there's any necessity of doing it right away.
It's totally impractical down the road if that's what school building's requiring. When you actually get into construction and you're meeting at least weekly, to have a committee of that size and trying to get them together to oversee a project, that's just, and I know where they're coming from, they're wrestling with the fact that no matter what they seem to do, construction costs continue to go up. They come up with the model school designs, and those are hugely expensive, and so.
But they saved a lot of money. I mean,
Wow.
Norwood's experience with because they had a high school that was not a model school, and then they were forced to switch to one to get the state money, and
Models
apparently
themselves are coming in 110 million plus, so, I mean, and that's supposed to be a discount, 500 plus per square foot of construction cost.
Okay, well, that's probably enough on that. Where we were, Article 16. Is the feasibility study, which you've already discussed with the school committee tonight, so you're familiar with that?
This is in the language the state requires, incidentally.
Well, it's been I gave it to Mike again to go over because he's got input some additional data.
No, he did. This is the updated version here.
Okay,
This part
but,
in
but
here.
then it has to be submitted to bond council, and they have to add wording from the Municipal Modernization Act, and et cetera, so it's a work in progress at this point, so. Okay, Article 17, that's the article that Mike, you requested that they put on to authorize construction of North Street from Dale Street to Prairie, roughly. And I guess the question is, that would involve probably about $2.5 million was the estimate that we had a few months ago. That'd have to be updated, of course. The big expense in that, of course, being the culvert under the, under North Street at the pond. Because there's all kinds of utilities also that cross in that area, so it would be a very complicated process. So I guess the question is, one of the things I discussed with Mo was, if we're not getting state funds to do this, do we want to take a look at it and do it to town standards? And I think we might, they might not be able to do everything, but I think we can do sidewalks like we have in front of Brothers, with the brick strip, and which is better than full brick sidewalk. Anyway, it's much safer. And do it and, start at, say, Dale Street and work down. Maybe by the third year, we could get some funding to help with the reconstruction of the culvert, and do it in phases rather than all at once. So think about that, and if you want to reword this so well, I guess it would allow it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my view of this would be, it sounds like Mo is not going to be ready with a revised plan to town specifications this year. So in light of the fact that we'll be putting this article on for a townwide master plan, I would think that's the kind of thing that could be discussed in the master planning process, sort of which streets need to be worked on and which would be most additive to our business district. I think North Street makes sense as one that would add to the business district. So I would be inclined to wait to give Mo a chance to figure out what it would look like. I think that North Street will still be there next year to work on. So
You'd defer this.
I would defer this until Mo can think about it some more and come up with, because I don't want to, we don't have a plan right now to put before the town meeting.
Right.
And so I'd rather have a plan to put before the town meeting. If we're going to, the master plan should be done in a year. And, I think the master plan will also address some of the building issues in Articles 14 and 15 as well. But I would defer Article 17 because I just don't think we're ready for it at this point. I don't think we have a plan to lay out. And, I think as long as it's sort of in the mix of things that we're thinking about, we'll find an opportune time to do it. I would strike it. I don't know if Pete does.
Okay.
Like, I think you've taken the lead on this. I've been listening to you. I'd take your advice.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay. The ALS, Chris, do you want to give an update on that, or? Oh, we have the chairman here. I'm sorry about that.
Chris, this would be fun to see what she's picked up in the meetings. I don't know, maybe we should have you.
She does the minutes. She might have a better idea of that. Yeah.
So you already got the full-blown presentation from Chief Hollingshead, so that's where we're at. So I'll give you the really dumbed-down version of where we're at. Number one, we're still, based on your feedback, we're proceeding down that path of trying to build up the additional 4 paramedics. The net impact to the town, I was looking at one of the videos from one of our past meetings and I misspoke. The net impact to the town is projected to be $150,000, but the impact on the fire department budget of that full 4 paramedics, additional paramedics, would be $300,000. It was just that we were projecting an additional $170,000 coming in by way of revenue. So it's just to make things accurate here. The fire department budget would go up from a salary standpoint, but it would also lead to a generation of additional revenue. And we haven't gotten into the 3-year phase in and how that breaks. That's the endpoint projection. That's not the first year's projection. Yeah. In our last meeting, though, we had alarm ambulance service come in, and we are going to take a look at a second alternative based on what we heard from Alert Ambulance, not Alarm, Alert Ambulance Service. It appears that if we were able to band together, perhaps, with Dover and Sherborne as a group, that the cost to Medfield, I think, would still be more than what we're looking at with this alternative. But that at least would be a number that would be worth having us get our arms around. And just to give you a completely unqualified preview, if it were in round number $600,000 to do that, the call volume with us at 50% in those two towns at 25%, you break that 600 up 50, 25, 25, and you're suddenly looking at a $300,000 cost impact to the town. Now, that's still more than 150, but at least we thought it was worth pursuing and fleshing that alternative out to make sure we've got good numbers. That just came out from the last meeting, so I don't think it's going to get us off our preferred alternative with what I know right now, but it did, compared to the chart you saw where all the outsourcing was all up in the upper right corner at $500,000 or $600,000, if there were interest on the part of the other towns, then it's an alternative that at least isn't a $500,000 or $600,000 alternative for us. It might be less than that. And we're going to do some work to run that to ground.
Have fun.
Yes.
Okay, so that's to be continued, I guess, but we'll leave that article as is.
I'd leave it in there. I think my answer on why it's there is the same as it was before. If we know that ultimately it's a $300,000 cost, and to put in the idea would be to try to hire 4 in the first year, that may be half of that $300,000 cost in the first year. Depending on what the warrant committee tells us around the financial status of being able to absorb that through normal budgeting, there may not be a budgeting reason to have this article in here, but I think, talking with Christine, even if we're not 100% bound to take this plan to the taxpayers, we kind of concluded it's probably the prudent thing to do anyway. So there's probably an article here that may not have a painful price tag with it, but we will be looking probably for an understanding and endorsement on the part of the public for.
Yeah, it gives you an alternate too. I mean, the other way of doing it would be if you were talking about adding 4 ALS personnel, you could add them to add that amount of money to the fire department budget.
Right.
And that would accomplish the same thing.
As far as the budgeting side goes, but the basic philosophy that says we're going ALS and we're going there by increasing the fire department staff by 50%, by adding 4 paramedics, that's probably something the public should have a chance to react to.
I would say so, definitely, yeah, because it's a permanent, long-term commitment.
Right.
So,
right.
That will grow over time.
Yeah. I do think we'll have a good argument for it, if so long as $150,000 in net cost of the town is viewed as, we're not going to get free ALS.
Okay, well, we'll leave that in then as it is. Article 19, is the same article we've had in past years.
And every time you bring that up, I say, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not the same article, but it's fine to have that in as a placeholder.
Well, my question on this one, though, is, I mean, if we're going to be having a special town meeting shortly after this annual town meeting on the hospital, why wouldn't we just defer this article until the special town meeting? Because if the master plan doesn't succeed, we don't need any of it.
Environmental remediation is there regardless though.
But I'm holding that in the account at 15,000 for that.
Is that enough for next year?
I think so.
I mean, if there's, for that, to that point, if we needed 15,000 or
Right.
whatever for remediation, that's one issue. I'm talking about the larger expense of kind of something to do with the disposition plan.
So here's where I come out on that. And you raise a good point. We don't know whether the special town meeting leads to an acceptance of the master plan. I've made the point in a couple of these meetings that I think the Board of Selectmen needs to figure out what the successor group to the master planning committee is. And what I'm trying hard not to have happen, at least from my standpoint, is to have that be something that we'll tackle in FY19 because we managed to delay the special town meeting until after the annual town meeting, and whatever came out of it, we're not actually geared up to do anything with it because we don't have that development committee. I think the placeholder, we may not know the answer to this yet because we're going to see some things at the end of January. We're going to know what the status of this whole master plan is by the end of March. But I see this placeholder as the placeholder that provides initial funding for that master development committee to get started, whether there's a master plan accepted by the town or not at a special town meeting.
Well,
So for instance, when you pull back the Lot 3, or the Ice House Road, Lot 3 and Hinckley Farm, if something's not ready by the annual town meeting, that's not linked to the master plan anymore. And if we're gonna do anything with it, we need a committee that's gonna actually do something with that.
well, I mean, putting aside, so here's how I see it procedurally. The first decision we have to make, are we going to endorse a master plan submitted by the MSH MPC? The answer to that question is no, we're kind of done at that point.
Well, but what does done mean?
Done for this year, right? We've then got to decide what comes next. So if we decide that we're not going to endorse their master plan, and therefore not going to call a special town meeting, then we have to decide what we do next. Right? And so that might be, and this I think argues in favor of having a placeholder here, right? Because that decision will be made before the annual town meeting. We'll know if we're going to have a special town meeting or not. I think if the answer to that first question is yes, okay, we're going to endorse the master plan and call a special town meeting, I think then I agree 100% with you. We have to develop what the next step would, what the development committee would be, how that would work, right? I still see that though as an article for the special town meeting. So we would have an implementing article for the creation of a development committee or whatever the process is that we define post special town meeting. Because it just seems to me to put the cart before the horse. Because what we're going to have to do after the special town meeting is going to vary depending on whether there's a committee created to implement the master plan, or we're kind of back to square one saying, okay, here's what we're going to do next. Having not been successful in implementing a master plan through the process that began in 2014, we're then going to have to decide what we're going to do next with respect to the hospital property. It may not involve a disposition committee at all. And if the only thing we're dealing with is the disposition of Lot 3 and potentially Hinckley, I think that can be done through existing committees in town. So I think if we're going to issue an RFP for Lot 3, that could just be done through the Economic Development Committee.
Well, so what I'm going to suggest is between now and March, I think there's more, if let's say we endorsed the master plan in March, and then it went to the special town meeting in May and it didn't pass. Let's do that one, so we didn't reject it before. What is that next thing that we do? I actually think that takes more thought about what that would be in the coming year than merely an issue of Lot 3 and the Hinckley property. So for me, it's like, and it would make sense to have a committee that's the thing that would follow the master planning committee in place, or at least prepared to be in place. This may be a small amount of money to start with. I'm not suggesting that this is the $500 million project that gets started. But if we haven't thought that through, then after the special town meeting, if it happens, the annual town meeting, if the special town meeting doesn't happen, or March, we're all looking at each other saying, well, gee, I wonder what we do now. And I'm trying to get something set up to where, regardless of outcome, we have a body that can do that.
But I think who's on, what that body is and who is on it varies depending on what they're doing. So if the special town meeting endorses a master plan and endorses the zoning, you're then going to have a committee that's essentially going to be implementing the master plan, right? They're going to be issuing RFPs, implementing the master plan that has been approved. That's what that committee is going to do, right? So, if the master plan does not succeed and there's no rezoning, right? So essentially we're status quo at the hospital. Then we have to decide, is it we have the immediate question of what happens for the next year. I think that's already answered by the Buildings and Grounds Committee, right? But we'll have to then decide, I think, kind of in the medium term, okay, what do we do with the buildings? What work has to be done in the buildings in the next year or two, right, to maintain the.
But again, I'd like to think about contingencies and what do you do if something, I'm hoping whatever the plan the committee finally comes up with is acceptable, and if you guys like it, the town likes it, and everything else. I have concerns, but I haven't seen the final plan. But if you didn't have a special town meeting, how do you fund whatever you do with the hospital for the rest of that year? Whatever it might be. It might be, you might decide you're going to have another special town meeting in November so that you can fund it. I mean, I think you ought to have a placeholder here, and you ought to have some contingency monies in it. I don't know what that amount should be, but
Mike, there's always been, it's a good point. There's always been two articles. One was for the Master Planning Committee, and the other one was for the maintenance of the hospital. I'm not going after the maintenance, because I think what you're talking about is the maintenance.
We don't have an article for the maintenance because we set up a revolving fund last year for maintenance, and that has the revenues from the rentals of the property up there.
So what we're saying is we don't have a maintenance, so to your point, Bill, we may not have a maintenance article there, but that's because we have adequate funding in the revolving fund to take care of the
I'm
things
more
that we're
concerned
doing.
about, do you hire another, God forbid, do you hire another consultant, or do you do another study or whatever? How do you fund it if you don't have an article in a placeholder with some money in it?
Could I point out something? The way this article is worded, it puts the money under the selectmen's
Right.
authorization, but the selectmen in turn can designate any other town board, commission, committee, or department to expend a portion. So regardless of what the setup will be, you will be able to designate whichever group you decide you want to spend the money. The only problem is, how much money are you going to set aside to do that?
Right.
But in terms of your ability to decide which group is going to spend it, this article provides that.
Right. And
So
I just
let me be crystal clear about what I'm saying. I don't think we want to entertain the idea of going beyond 3 years of master planning. So as this article placeholder is worded, it says it's for master planning. I don't actually think it's a good idea for any of us to promote an impression by any of the taxpayers in town that there's master planning going to go for a fourth year. So I'm reacting to the wording, not the idea that we need money in there to proceed with development of the hospital in whatever useful, productive way we can proceed with development of that property based on what the outcome of the annual town meeting, special town meeting, and the selectmen's review in March is. That was what I was reacting to there.
This is a draft
I guess what I
article,
would
so
suggest
if you
then
can come up
discuss
with
is if you
another
have a
term.
semantics issue, if you want to suggest some alternative wording for this one.
For right now, I'm just, I can do that, actually, I can do that.
I mean, I just, my concern is, I don't think it's, I don't like the idea of a contingency appropriation, of saying to town meeting, look, we need $100,000 because if the master plan doesn't fail, it doesn't succeed, we're going to have to do something there. I mean, I would much rather have that as an article on the warrant for the special town meeting. In the event that the planning and the zoning and the master plan articles fail, you would then have an article at the special town meeting and say, okay, these other ones have failed. Here's an appropriation for however you define it broadly, stabilization, maintenance, not master planning, but sort of the next year of work that needs to be done. And I think John Thompson has identified some things he thinks needs to be done with the buildings
It's
to
maintenance.
maintain their, but I don't know if it's more than would be covered by the revolving fund.
Stabilization conceivably would be more than maintenance.
More than what would be covered by the revolving fund. In other words, if the town comes back and says, look, we don't like the master plan, we want to keep it status quo, we have assets of the town there that we've got to protect, we've got to mitigate our risk and liability from ownership of those buildings. And so that to me is, if the master plan is rejected, then we have to stabilize the buildings while we figure out what we're going to do next in terms of looking at
So
further
we're going to take,
development.
so the part that I'm bucking on that is that then says, so a year from now, perhaps, we will start a new conversation around developing whatever property there we want to develop. I'm saying, no, actually, if we, after 3 years, cannot pull together a master plan that the town supports, I think we need to think about a different way of developing that property.
That I agree with.
And we need a body to be doing that. Now, you know.
But how
you
is
may
that
be
different
right.
from just creating a new master plan?
So let me go with what you said, Mike. Let's say the master plan passes.
Right.
You're still going to need that article at the special town meeting to fund and authorize the body that's going to carry that forward.
Yes.
So I'll buy that. I'll agree with you there. I think we still want to keep this as a placeholder, because as you said, if it's clear by March that we're not going to have a special town meeting, then we need the placeholder here to put that body in place to fund it. If it turns out that we are going to have the special town meeting, we need an article like this in the special town meeting, regardless of the outcome on the vote for the master plan, because we need to be able to move ahead and do things rather than just say that's done for the year.
Right.
We'll try again in FY19. Okay.
I agree with you that we have to define in advance of that special town meeting what that body is, what their charter is going to be, how it's going to operate, and so you can tell people at the special town meeting, this is what's going to happen. I don't know if we could populate the committee. Maybe we can, even before the special town meeting. So this is the implementation, however you describe it.
Right. To be honest, on the hospital committee, it's possible that the special town, the master plan that says it's going to be this kind of housing we want to put here and that kind there, at the level that it drives a zoning change acceptance, that still won't be a master plan that tells a developer what they need to do. You'd still have to figure out individual projects, what is on the east side. So there still is a site development, which I think you need a qualified site developer to kind of put the real mechanics, to find real people with real ideas wanting to build real projects. And I don't think that's going to be in this master plan.
I think, if I may be recognized, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, John.
I think the mistake here, Gus, is that you keep using the word develop, and I have a far different sense of where the town's going to come down on this. I think they don't want to see.
We're not, we're
and-
not in disagreement, John. But what about the southeast
I'm in
corner?
disagreement, because you keep talking about a developer and what kind of development.
Right.
I think many people in this town, sufficient to defeat the non-plan. We just don't have a plan at this point. But that we're going to be down the road and say, let's take a breather here and see what alternatives there are, because we've never looked at any alternatives other than fairly intensive development, quite intensive at this stage. And we have to have an open mind, I hope, on the Board of Selectmen, that if the town meeting really doesn't want to see development up there, at least in the near term, that we come up with some other alternatives.
Well, first off, John, I thought you and I were far apart a year ago. I don't think you and I are far apart anymore. You referred to intensive development. I think you're absolutely right. Personally, I think you're right. Intensive development up there is going to be a major liability to getting acceptance. But the idea of no development up there, the idea of shuttering everything and letting it sit there for years.
No one's ever said that.
Good. Then we're in agreement.
But it could be that most of those buildings should come down, and then it's a question of what do you do? How do you get them down, and you take out a bonding situation?
And John, I think that's entirely possible that at least to some degree you're correct about that. My point is, but you need that body. I'm saying don't sit there and do nothing for a year. I'm saying get that body in place to figure, whatever the outcome of the special town meeting is, get the body in place that then can start to do things. It may be that we don't do like 100% answer to this thing. It may be that we have to get a little more tactical and figure out what are the needs that we know we can use. What can we do now no matter what? Because we can't figure out the 20-year picture of what this master plan is going to be. That's where I've been. I didn't start there. That's kind of where I am now, because I'm looking at what we're struggling with, and I'm not convinced we have the strategic skill set to put that entire picture together. I could be wrong. We'll know by May.
Well, this is a potentially long analysis and discussion, but the long and the short of it is there can be easily sufficient development up there to aid the housing, and I applaud the work you've been doing and the Housing Committee's report, or efforts to get the satisfactory outcome about affordable housing. But we can do housing up there to some degree but not in the 390 degree.
So I think you and I are not as far apart, at least in the overall, as you may have thought.
Thank you.
So why don't we go on to the next article, and I think that there's sort of general consensus that we need to keep money flowing towards the hospital.
And was Gus going to reword the?
Yeah,
This is gonna offer some
because it's a
suggestions.
placeholder, it won't be hard for me to reword it. I can,
Well,
I probably can give it to you before we leave tonight, Mike.
okay. Mark had some ideas too, you might want to see what he's suggesting. Oh, okay, Article 20 is, this was Jean Minio's article. She's looking for a $25,000 grant, along with $25,000 from state grant funds and $50,000 that they plan to raise privately to do architectural and engineering plans to incorporate cultural uses into the reuse of the state hospital. So they're looking for $25,000 appropriation from the town, which would be 25% of the cost, but would be a 50% match for the state grant. Okay, Article 22.
21?
Excuse me, 21, okay.
21 we talked about already.
Yeah, I want to just alert the two of you to one point about the wording, and Mark and Mike, you need to be sensitive to this too. As all these draft articles have been written, they talk about transferring the Hinckley property over for this purpose, but in fact, the State Hospital Master Planning Committee has not designated the entire Hinckley property for this senior and affordable housing. So we need to keep track of the fact that there's actually a potentially buildable housing lot that's there. Mike, I think you may have, my point isn't that I want to see us put a house up there. My point is, it is an asset that the town owns, which is appropriate, I think, for housing, and I don't want to get it lost in the morass of it being called an urban jungle or whatever it's called.
Okay, well, the way
so
this
there's an asset we own there that should not be lumped into the affordable senior housing.
or a portion.
This one tracks, Article 21 tracks the original Lot 3 authorization
Yep.
from years ago. This is, on its face, is probably the most acceptable legally of the variations that follow. And the other thing that.
Well, the only reason I disagree, Mark, is the last part of it designates that we are using it for
all or a portion, before you get there. It says to sell or otherwise dispose of all or a portion for that purpose.
Then in my case, I would like wording that makes it a little clearer for somebody that reads this 5 years from
And
now.
also understand that there's a checks and balances here. Town meeting cannot do anything more than give you authority. You're free to act or not within that authority.
In other words, you don't have.
If there's,
can't
no, I
be
understand that.
compelled by town meeting.
I'm looking 5 years out when somebody refers back to this article and doesn't pick up at all on the fact that there's land there that's not the land that was targeted for the affordable senior housing. And what I've heard in the draft from the state hospital is that this is land that, for the time being, is set aside as urban jungle or urban green or urban wild, which it won't be hard for the town to forget that there's probably a $250,000 housing lot that's a rear lot.
But
There's more than that. There's an opportunity there for the town to combine it with other land that's in that area and have a much better
Exactly.
Asset for the
Right.
town.
And for that reason, I'm not pushing that it be actually sold yet, but I'm reluctant to have anything that kind of erases the memory that that land is even there.
Well, but I think that in the implementation, I mean, let's say this were to pass, presumably we would carve those lots out of the land that was set aside for this purpose.
Can you carve it out now? Can you just, in text, describe that, the easterly portion, the westerly portion, the southerly
Without it
portion?
having been subdivided, you can, but without it being subdivided, you're gonna be a challenge because you're gonna be creating a potential title issue when you then go ahead and try to do something.
So Mark, I'm I'll trust your legal judgment on how to word that. I would feel better if there was wording in there that made it a little bit easier for somebody reading this article 5 years from now to not come away with the impression that we allocated this entire lot for affordable and senior housing.
You know, there's such a large piece of wetlands in the middle that it would be pretty easy to define a line down the middle of the wetlands by number of feet off of the southern boundary, I would think.
But that's a
Although one of the difficulties with wetlands, they can change over time because they're based on the plant type of plant.
And I can see an
Well, I'm
advantage
not-
to
I'm
having
not-
a
I'm defining it by
disposal.
the
If
number of
you've got a
feet.
copy of the plan or even the assessors, and you can mark up the part that
Okay.
you want excluded and give it to me, and I'll try to do something. The other thing is, when we get to the motion, maybe the motion can be tighter.
So the cave's got a drawing that that's.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
calls
I
it
think we
out.
have, yeah. We know where they want to put the housing and we know what the lot is, so I think that's fine. I did have one nitty-gritty question, though. The housing, the senior and affordable housing for Hinckley uses a portion of the Council on Aging land as well, I believe. If it does, is there any legal action that's required on the part of the town to reallocate or, recognize that the land that was allocated to the Council on Aging, a piece of that is now being borrowed, used, appended, I don't know what the right verb is.
I'm not sure that we ever actually formally took an action to transfer the property to the care, custody, and control of the Council on Aging to
Okay.
begin with.
Okay. So,
Right.
That's the plan, that's the current plan.
so I'm not trying to create a problem. I'm asking a question because as I was thinking about it, it's like, gee, there's this piece of property that's on the Council on Aging lot that's actually part. Is there any legal issue that we have there to make sure that that's handled properly? I'm not,
Well, there is a provision in the zoning bylaw that you can't access industrial property through residential. I don't know whether that works in reverse.
No.
It doesn't, so you can access residential property through industrial property?
There's no prohibition on it.
No provision.
yeah, my whole point is if there's absolutely no legal issue with this housing development partially being situated on the Council on Aging lot, regardless of subdivisions and border lines, I don't have a problem. It was just that as I was thinking about it, I realized that that's part of the plan, is to put part of this development on that property. Is there anything legally that we need to do to make that okay? That's all. It's a question, it's not a,
And it sounds like Mark is saying no, because we never gave it to the Council on Aging in any event.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that,
so I'm just flagging it.
Yeah, all right, so there's an issue to figure out.
Okay, Article 22, 23, 24, and 25 of the citizen petitions. I don't know if you want to address those because
there's just, there are variations on a theme, I think, for the most part, but virtually all of them have legal problems with the way they're drafted. First of all, several of them talk about LIPs. A LIP is a term of legal art. It's the local initiative program under DHCD. That's not apparently what they really mean when, I don't really know what they mean, but it's pretty clear that's not what they mean.
I think we should talk to them, and we can't delete these or edit them, so I don't think we need to go through them.
No, I agree.
No,
I agree.
no. But we need to have a placeholder for our one here
Yeah,
at this point.
yeah.
Do you want to, at this point, do you want to invite them to your next meeting on the 16th? Or do you want to hold off till February?
Well, I would wait until our
Yeah,
article
wait
is
till our
drafted.
article's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, but it would be good to accelerate the drafting of that article, because they're just frustrated.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out, what can we do, and they probably had a meeting, and 4 different people gave them 4 different pieces of information. They said, so let's
Yeah.
do them all and see which one sticks to the wall.
The last report I got on Friday from Courtney from COG suggested they'd made a fair amount of progress with the state in trying to explain what the proposal will look like and getting the state comfortable with different aspects of it. So it was a more encouraging report from her at the end of the week than we had earlier in the week. So I think they are working on it. Sarah's working on it. They do have to kind of work on the bureaucratic side of things, which, and I'm sure, clearly some people at the state were working last week, but
And just for clarification, This property is under your care, custody, and control. These are ad hoc committees that are referred to here. Nobody's made a formal transfer to them, either the State Hospital Study Committee or anybody else. So there's no transfer to be made. It's here, it's never gone anywhere else. So,
But they do need permission to lease it from town meeting.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Any kind of, anything short of a license, any kind of interest in real estate.
It seemed to me of any of these, Article 23 is the one that has the most likelihood of being legal.
23 is, again, very similar to the Lot 1,
Yeah.
So 26 is our downtown
Lot 3,
improvement
rather.
fund?
Yeah.
Is that right? 26 is the downtown improvement fund?
Yes, yeah.
15,000, is it, Mike?
Yes, 15,000. We just got the latest payment from the state in for that. I didn't have it on the agenda because I just got it this morning from Georgia. It was about $37,600 for the last 3 month period, which is consistent with what we've been receiving, a little bit higher, I think, so.
That's great.
Can I ask a question about 23?
Yep.
Is
Bless you.
the question I would have here is the issue of the 99-year lease or whatever. I mean, I would have thought if I were writing that article, I would have tried to leave it open for the town with, sale or lease, if I were crafting that article. I mean, I understand where I think the Senior Housing Committee is coming from. They're looking to make the lease of the land or whatever under terms and conditions that would be favorable to the developer to build affordable, rental units or whatever. But I mean, you could do the same thing with a sale. I mean,
Not if part of this involves the town donating the land.
This is a parallel to the original Ice House Road Lot 3, where it's specifically ground lease because we wanted to retain control. I think they just took that and did a cut and paste job. So that's one of the options they put forward.
But when you town still want the option of a sale or a lease in an instance like this?
Not our article, not our issue.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just
Responded. We're going to have our own one, Bill, that hopefully people will vote for in lieu of these.
The issue, if I understand where the Senior Housing Committee is coming from and where I think the town should come from, is that they're looking for a $300,000 to $450,000 unit. That's what they want the price to be. They are of the opinion, and they may be right, I don't know, that you can't get that built here unless the land is free. Now, you can go 40 minutes south of here and you can pay $350,000 for a home and get one of the nicest homes in a town. So apparently there's builders somewhere that know how to build a house that doesn't cost $350,000 to build. But if the town donates the land and that's used as a way to hold the price of the unit down, then you can't afford to have just the first owner buy this subsidized unit and then own it and sell it at the market price, because then the windfall all goes to the first owner.
So does the lease provide you with that protection?
Yeah, I mean,
So the terms of the lease are essentially you can't lease sell for a profit?
Yeah, there'd be some lease payment, I presume.
I was just trying to understand what the advantages were to a lease in this particular instance.
Again, it gets problematic when you're talking about the town making the land available for less than fair market value.
Right.
It has to be for a public purpose. And it might even be a case where you'd have to consider special legislation to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
And we've heard from the chair of the State Hospital Committee that banks don't like financing residential property on leased land, so that the lease of those lands,
I'm not
lots may not
challenging the
make
article.
sense.
I was just trying to understand what
Yeah.
pluses and minuses of my.
So 27, Mike?
Yeah, 27 is,
I think John
is the
John
rail trail.
already had a.
Oh, I'm sorry, John?
Made a statement, it has to be for some public purpose. Not have a lease.
No, to make town land available for less than fair market value, gifted, basically. There has to be a recognized public purpose involved.
And we see one here.
I don't know. Short answer, I mean, if it were clearly affordable housing with a capital A, that's been recognized by the state. Yes, you could do that. But something that that the people that it targets are not people who qualify. Very gray area.
Number 27, Mike.
Okay, Article 27, that's the rail trail.
Are they gonna go ahead with it? They're going ahead with it?
They apparently have come up with a way of funding it. They're gonna build it themselves, and this would just authorize the town to go ahead, the town authorize them to go ahead with it.
So this gets back to a question that I asked, I think, in our first discussion on town committees. This is an advocacy article by a group of people that are on the appointed Rail Trail Study Committee. And this was where I had the concern. I've been consistent about the concern. I'd love to have a rail trail. It's close to my house. It would be great. But the concerns I've had around the indemnification, and it's been confirmed by the lawyers I've been talking to over the last couple of years, the piece that I struggle with is this is a the Board of Selectmen appointed committee, which is putting an article in. If they were doing it as just citizens, I would have no problem at all with this. But we have a town-appointed committee putting an article in that at least one selectman is dead set against because of reasons that I've raised for a long time. And it's very confusing to me how it is a Board of Selectmen can appoint a committee which turns into an advocacy committee on a particular article. It's one thing if the committee has a recommendation, comes to the board, and the Board of Selectmen agrees with that, and then we move ahead with it. It's not clear to me how it is, I don't fault them for the work they're doing, but it's not clear to me how the Board of Selectmen is using its committees when it's using a committee to drive what seems almost a predetermined answer here. And I just struggle with that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
Well, I mean, based on the charter of the original Rail Trail Study Committee, which I think was 2009?
Yeah, it goes back.
I mean, was that, I mean, I believe the way the town charter reads is that any town board or committee can put articles on the warrant.
Right.
Okay.
And
It's a bylaw, but, and frankly, at the time it was drafted and I drafted it, the focus was really standing boards and committees. It was not really intended to go to ad hoc committees and give them that authority. That being said, with an annual, it only takes 10 signatures to put a petition on anyway, so it's almost, if not a moot point, it's not very difficult to get around.
So I'm not mad that the people who would like to see this want an article here, but I'm trying to understand how a Board of Selectmen creates committees that then, in the sensitivity I have, is when a committee is created to study something, but really what it is no, we decided we wanted that to happen, so we'll have this committee that will study this and will come in with the answer, as opposed to having an even up, straight up analysis that turns into a
But
recommendation.
I mean, Pete, you were the only one who was here in 2009. I mean, when the committee was created, were they all advocates for this, or were they created to study it and then decide what to do? And they have come to conclude that it's a good idea and are putting it forward.
I think that there was a lot of lack of knowledge at that point in time about how it would happen, if it could happen, what the details would be, and so that it really was I think it was seen as an effort to try to gain information.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the same rules apply that I said earlier. It simply authorizes you to enter into a lease. You've got the authority, you're not compelled to exercise it.
So my comments have more to do with the three of us as we look at board appointments and committee appointments. It's not that this article's here. Yeah.
I just find myself saying, and I'm going to wind up going to a town meeting opposed on technical grounds, certainly not opposed philosophically. Best man at my wedding was one of the founders of the Rhode Island Rail Trail Conservancy. So it's not like I am philosophically against the idea, but there's issues that are associated with this, and I'll wind up being an opponent.
Right. Well, I mean, I think just on the 30 seconds on the philosophical point, I mean, anytime you appoint a committee to study something and they come up with a recommendation, they ultimately become an advocate for the recommendation, right? And so I think I agree with you that we should not be appointing committees to study something who all the members have a predetermined view of what they want. There's no reason to appoint a committee to do that. But I don't see anything philosophically wrong with the idea that a committee, having studied an issue, has concluded that there's a recommendation that's in the best interest of the town, and is then gonna take the lead in advocating for that article. I think that's how, it's sort of a normal course of action.
Without
I just don't know, I
without
wasn't.
actually
I-
getting the endorsement of the Board of Selectmen.
What's that?
Without, so once we've
Well,
launched them.
I think that's where
autonomous?
we, as we are, I think the best practice is to define their charter up front. And so I don't think, I would say no, right? I don't think we should appoint a study committee that's autonomous. I think that if you appoint a study committee, the recommendation comes to the board, and it's up to the board as the elected representatives of the town to decide what to do with it.
Okay.
But again, this was 8 years ago. So, I mean,
So enough, I made the point, I made my
Yeah.
point. It has more to do with the thoughtfulness we put into the boards and committees and the chart, and I agree, the charters that we give them.
So I agree with you, Gus, on that.
Yep, okay, good.
Okay, Article 28, I just put this in after discussion with the chief and after the last accident on Western North Meadows Road. The chief told me that that intersection has been designated by Mass DOT as a high accident intersection. He didn't think there would be any money available. He would like to do something this year to make some improvements to it, which may include using some of our Chapter 90 money. I thought we ought to at least talk to our representatives, the senator, to see if we can get this project funded through some of the state programs, because it seems to me, again, this is a commuter road. It's not a Medfield road primarily. It's primarily a commuter road, both of these roads, North Meadows and West Street. And it seemed to me the state ought to assume some responsibility. And actually, they designed, I don't know, I think the state designed this road and built it, and then turned it over to the town, so.
27, yeah.
I use this intersection all the time, and I acknowledge there's a lot of accidents there. I, for the life of me, can't figure out why. The sight lines are incredible.
People are aggressive, that's why.
Yes.
I think the traffic lights are not
They
as
see
good
that
as they
light,
should be.
Yeah.
and they want to make it through the light, and they just go. And by the
That
time-
part, because you got a 50-mile-an-hour one way and a 30-mile-an-hour the other, and so I think that's a piece of it, but the sight lines are so good, it's like,
They are,
man.
yeah. The chief did have some concern when he was at one time about the lights twisting, so sometimes you can't see the
Yeah.
traffic signals.
They're
to see
really
what
old traffic lights.
changes.
They're not,
Yeah. I
And
think when
most
you're coming
visible.
on West Street towards 27,
yeah.
as you move in the line, you can lose sight of the light.
I
it goes
guess,
behind a
yeah.
pole.
But good news is if it's something like that, chances are it's not expensive to fix. And I've thought that it's the timing of the lights on the light change. I think I could be wrong, but the last time I went through that, I paid attention, there's like a 3 to 5 second delay. When the light going across turns red, there's like a 3 to 5 second delay before the light in your lane turns green. And that, to me, was also something that probably could help, because you got people coming at 50 miles an hour in one direction, 30 in another, and it seemed like maybe that change had been made. I don't know.
Okay, well, probably we ought to get our reps in to talk about that too, to see if we can start working something out on that. Article 28, oh no, that's the one we just did. Article 29, that's a MEMA requirement that we have to do every 5 years, and that's our town share, and the MEMA will pay for the rest. And it's part of it's sort of like a civil defense plan. Article 30 I'll let Mark talk about that. That's amending the dog control bylaw.
There's been a committee working on it, and actually what they're working on as a draft was a bylaw that I generated in Franklin, which got picked up and made it around the full circle. So they're actually quite far along with it, and I've spoken with Carol Mayer. I haven't been able to speak to John Thompson. I was hoping he'd be here tonight. My attitude is, let's put it forward, and, if there's anything that needs to be tweaked later, but it's way better than what we have on the books right now. My concern is the dangerous and aggressive dogs, that you have the full range of tools, and the police have the full range of tools to deal with that. We kind of dodged an issue a month or so ago, as you will recall, but I want you to be able to be on solid legal ground if that issue arises, and that bylaw addresses that. What we have on the books right now is terrible. The good thing about what John and his committee have done is they have merged the non-dog control parts of the bylaw so that they're running in succession with the town code in that section. So they've done a cut and paste, bringing in the dog control stuff, and bringing the other regulatory, the licensing and all that sort of thing. So, I spoke to Carol today, and I'll follow up with John, and my suggestion would be for them to complete their work, and my advice would probably be to totally, first of all, it shouldn't be called the animals, it should be dogs. That's what it regulates, the bylaw. It's what it always regulated, and when the conversion was made to, by general code, they shouldn't have been allowed to stick the word animals in there instead. So it should strike the whole existing and replace it with a new dog section.
Okay, great.
Okay, Article 32.
31.
31.
Solar on the DPW.
Okay, so Jerry McCarty did an update on the town garage and engineering survey, and the result of it was that the garage can handle the weight load, both of a snow load and the solar panel. So it is safe to put solar panels on. We did transfer $150,000 out of free cash last year, but because the money wasn't spent by June 30th, it reverted back to free cash. So that money isn't available. We have about $240,000 left over from the wastewater treatment plant bylaw that we've transferred for the town garage solar. And I think there's $25,000 roughly left from the original appropriation to build the town garage. So you have roughly $270,000. When I talked to Jerry, he thought maybe it needs to be updated, the design, and he thought maybe you would want to do it in phases, so you would put the core facilities, but then only do maybe one of the wings initially, rather than do the whole thing at once, rather than go for additional funds to do the whole thing at once. So,
What's the total cost?
I don't know, because he has to update it. Before, it was around $380,000, I believe, was the low bid, but they were not DCAM certified, so we had to throw it out. And the other bid was way above that, so. So it's probably, my guess would be somewhere in the 400,000 range to do the whole thing, or 450, somewhere like that.
And this is a revenue-generating facility as opposed to just simply
Revenue
offsetting electric?
generating, Yeah, it certainly proved in the wastewater treatment plant. We made, the first year, we made more than the cost of the bond
Yeah.
payment, so. Okay, but that covers us for now. We figure, until Jerry can figure out some more. If he ever gets all the leaks patched up, he's trying to deal with these days, poor guy. Okay, Article 32 is, this is Mark, you can answer that one. This is where the.
Yeah, this is just one of the aspects of Municipal Modernization Act, made it more flexible. This is basically it ties into the provision of the, it's a local acceptance statute that allows you to withhold permits and approvals when people are out, haven't paid.
They have liens, outstanding liens.
Right, so this allows the flexibility to update it instead of waiting annually the treasurer do it, so it's just a language clarification.
So who does it?
Treasurer.
So the treasurer does it. It doesn't require town meeting action.
Oh, no, the language is it's a bylaw, it's a local bylaw, so the town, yeah, it has to be
Has to be
adopted.
done by the town meeting, but the town meeting only meets annually, so. what's
I
the
know, but once the
difference if it-
bylaw language is changed, then the treasurer collector has flexibility she doesn't have right now.
Okay, 33, sidewalk easement, this is for Metacomet, this is for that stone wall at South Street in Metacomet. Bobby Kennedy was able to work out a easement agreement with the neighbors. They were willing to donate the easement. In return, we put that wall in, and I think they're happy.
Mike, who worked it out?
The what?
You said somebody worked it, somebody Kennedy?
Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy did that? Oh, good for him.
So, okay, Article 42.
34. It's the Charlotte Reineman water easement for the,
That's 34.
well, that's the next one.
Maybe, okay, let's see.
And that's probably an
Oh,
article I
sorry,
have to recuse
yeah, I
myself on,
skipped
because they're my
the page,
neighbors of mine.
Okay, the water easements. This is a lot, I don't know if you remember Charlotte Reineman, or Richard Reineman died last year, and his widow Charlotte, and the kids are selling want to sell the land because they pay for her expenses. I think she's in a nursing home. So by moving, there was originally a 3-foot water easement to connect the state hospital water tower to the state hospital well field. And it ran right through the middle of the property that they acquired. So it makes it pretty much unusable as a buildable lot. On the other hand, 3-foot easement is not very good to the town these days, because you'd have to dig it out by hand if you're gonna do anything in there. So, the thoughts, and we'll have a map prepared so you can take a look at this, is to trade a 10 or 15-foot easement along the edge of the property lines with them for abandoning the 3-foot easement through the middle, and it would give them a building lot, and it would give the town a better easement to work with if you ever wanted to run a water main from the hospital well field out to Harding Street. But we'll have a map to show you exactly what's involved.
There's got to be a water main there already.
There was an old water main because, but it hadn't been used for.
So it probably
15
isn't a
years.
usable condition.
Question. This isn't one of the easements that we got with the hospital well field.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
It is.
It is.
We ought to check the land disposition agreement to see if what we can do with that. I'm not sure, I don't know if there's any restrictions on what we can do with those easements. So I would suggest that, you know, Mark, maybe take a look at the land disposition agreement for the water tower property.
Good idea, Mark.
I mean, maybe it's just the issue of replacing it or moving it or whatever is fine, but I mean, you may have to go back to the state or whatever just to clarify that.
Generally, there's rights, in the absence of language that precludes it, the owner of the land that's subject to an easement can move the easement anyway without.
I just, it's there. I mean, all those easements are specifically called out in the land disposition agreement. It's just worth checking. That's all I would suggest.
Okay, Article 35 was submitted by Megan Sullivan, who's chair of the Transfer Station Recycling Committee, I presume based on a vote of the committee. And it's to put recycling barrels next to the trash barrels wherever there are trash barrels on public land in town.
I think it's actually related to an Eagle Scout project, and Eagle Scout has come to the recycling committee to ask them to sponsor the article.
Okay.
So my question on that one is, why do we actually need an article to buy recycling barrels? Do we have an article to buy the rubbish barrels that they're sitting next to?
I think these are the very expensive solar-powered recycling, they're called big belly solar compactors. I believe that's what they were looking at.
Oh, yeah, those are fairly expensive, I think, yeah.
So we don't have a price cost of those yet?
I haven't seen one yet.
Yeah, Megan just brought this in one day, and I haven't, the committee's meeting, I believe, next week.
The committee doesn't have a very big budget, and there was some question as to whether or not the project was in the budget, whether or not DPW had the money in their budget to do it.
Article 36, did we ever receive a petition from that resident?
I have not seen one if it came in
I
from.
haven't either. A resident called one day and was, she had moved here from New York, and she was concerned that there were no streetlights on her street. And I said, well, we don't have streetlights, on many streets in town, and this street in particular is a dead-end street that runs from Pleasant Street to the railroad tracks, and it's only about 8 or 10 houses on it. So she said she wanted to follow through, and she would submit a petition for town meeting. Chris, I believe, sent her the information on how to submit a petition, but we haven't received anything yet. So if we get one by the closing of the warrant, we will act on it. Closing the warrant, I believe, is the next meeting.
I believe so.
Yeah,
I have to look it up, I don't know off the top
yeah,
of my
the
head.
17th, so it's.
Have we had people do this before, just because they want a light?
No.
Just from a procedure, from procedurally,
It's unusual, but, it can be, as Mark said, 10 signatures can put an article out
yeah,
there.
I'm just questioning whether it's likely to get approved. The closest I can think of is the petitions that had to do with sidewalks on North Street.
Well, I mean, the significant thing is, going back, I was on the planning board in the very early 90s, and I think even before then, there was a policy of not having streetlights in residential subdivisions, which has probably saved the town a small fortune going forward. So there's been a strong public policy on that point.
And I was on the light patrol when Proposition 2.5 passed. We took out 25% of the streetlights in town.
Yeah.
And I believe since then, we've only put one back in, and that's 1981. So we're not big on public streetlights. And the conditions at the time were it had to be on a heavily traveled street, a dangerous intersection, or a bad curve. Those were the only 3 conditions for putting a covered light in.
We need one at the FAF Center.
At the FAF Center?
The entrance to the FAF Center, the driveway there is dark. It needs a street light.
Well, I think that would be on their land though, so that wouldn't be considered a street light, that would be considered a parking lot light. And it would be.
Well, there's a parking lot light, but there's a pole out by the street. It'd be good to have a street light there.
Yeah,
because
well,
of the.
see, it could be done either way. It could be done by hooking into there, so it
Yeah.
would be metered, but, whatever.
37.
Yeah, 37, okay. We did that, town-owned street, that's on Pleasant Court. Or, no, 37 is, that's a routine one we do every year. And it'll be over in 23 when all those bonds are paid off. Article 38 is, when we bought the last ambulance, we borrowed, I believe, $115,000 from the stabilization fund because there wasn't enough money in the ambulance revolving fund. First year, we paid $70,000. Second year, I think we paid $25,000. So there's $20,000, whatever it is, it's $20,000 to pay off the final loan to stabilization account. I'll have to check with Joy to make sure there is $20,000 in the ambulance revolving fund to cover that money, but that will satisfy the loan, in effect, internal loan we borrowed from ourselves. Article 39 is the OPEB trust fund, and we have the chairman of, this time I recognize the chairman, so.
So the recommendation, as you may recall from the briefing, was we were recommending effectively $480,000, which was basically not counting the enterprise fund contribution against the $400,000 commitment. I had a preliminary discussion with Tom Marie around this, and Tom is supportive of the idea of trying to get a long-term financial issues straightened out. So without pinning him down, his first reaction was that he was optimistic that the warrant committee would be able to support that. So.
Okay. Okay.
Iron and manganese deposit removal.
The
40, study manganese and iron
yeah,
deposits.
they are still trying to figure out the best way to deal with that. I think they are leaning towards building a new well between well number 3 and well number 4. Their engineer has found that there's a very strong water supply at that location, and they are testing it for its iron and manganese concentrations to see what would be involved in
Are 3 and 4 the ones that are behind Wheelock?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
They did look at several sites around town, including the old state hospital well field, and found that the best way to proceed would be to build a new well, but it wouldn't be considered new well, it would be considered a rehab of existing well number 3.
Oh, okay.
Because the new well takes 10 years to get permitted.
Why wouldn't that one have iron and manganese like well 3 and 4 then?
It's got a much stronger flow. It may, but it would make more sense than in terms of efficiencies in a plant and all.
Yeah, geology is a funny thing, and
Yeah,
it could also
okay.
be that we haven't been pumping much out of that well supply for years, so maybe there's dilution, it's been diluted with the water that's flowing and flowed into the area. I don't know.
Okay. 41 is repair and repainting Mount Nebo water tower.
Yes, and that will be a bond authorization paid for out of the Water Enterprise Fund. The estimated cost is about $1 million. However, the initial report from the engineer indicated that the inside might be in good shape. So the $1 million contemplated painting the inside and the outside. And the inside is very expensive to paint because you have to drain it and stage it and everything else. So
But they're gonna drain it anyway for the mixer?
They have to do something with the bottom. They gotta put some sort of, actually, I think, don't they already have a circulating pump on the bottom, but it isn't working correctly, and they have to repair it, I think, so, whether they'll
Maybe they
have to
don't drain
drain it or not, I don't know. There was some concern about if they didn't drain it, there'd be a moisture problem when they were painting the outside. But that's for the engineers to figure out, I guess. Okay, Article 42 is, Mark, this is your recreational marijuana, even though we passed it twice.
Yeah,
you think
this
we
is
pass
kind
it
of,
again?
it's place saver at the moment. The language is basically just gonna ratify and affirm the action of last year because the legislation authorizing it came after the fact. The boots and suspenders approach,
As we keep
belt and
doing it, we
suspenders.
keep doing this every year, one of these votes is gonna go the opposite direction.
It'd be funny if the town changed its mind. Okay, Article 43 is, and 44 are.
No, 43 is-
43, we already discussed.
Yeah.
That's the permanent planning building committee. Article 44 and 45 are zoning changes.
So I had, and I don't want to divert us tonight, because I don't think it's our problem to do it, but almost every one of the provisions in Article 44 didn't make any sense to me. And what I mean by that is a lot of them are subjective requirements, and I found myself, like on the first one, the development of multiple dwellings does not detract from the livability, scale, character, or economic value of existing residential neighborhoods. If a multifamily house went in, and we have that as a bylaw, and I'm in a butter, and I don't want it to go in, I would think that I'd be bringing lawsuits about how it's detracting from the economic value of my house. So it felt to me like these were, many of them, not all of them, but many of them were subjective. I don't actually know how you do it. There's the one that says, number 6, it addresses two-family dwellings. So I guess it doesn't apply to multifamily dwellings that are greater than 2. There's one about, I don't know what a network of pedestrian-friendly streetscapes is, but so there were just, the wording on these, a lot of them were confusing to me, which just means I don't know how you write these things. But
No,
just look-
there's a way to write them, and I haven't reviewed this, and I wasn't part of the process.
Right.
That being said, there are some that may on their face appear to be subjective, but could be legally valid with the appropriate evidence at a hearing or a trial. There was actually a case called Buccaneer Development from the western part of the state where it was determined that a proposed a multifamily project was not appropriate, it was too dense for a neighborhood. It was proper consultant's testimony and all that sort of thing. So if it's properly worded, it can pass
I
muster.
had, like, even the second one, which is development encourages greater diversity of housing opportunities. And I read that and said, well, what multifamily housing development would not qualify? So
I don't know where they got these,
So, okay, so point's made. I just read them, not with any expertise. I was just reading the words.
When I
And they
put
didn't
this
make sense.
together, I asked Mark and Sarah to go over this and see if they could
Yeah, okay.
make sense out of the wording, so
Okay.
we'll see what they come up with.
You know, there's a public hearing on this next Monday night. The planning board is,
On these articles.
no, I didn't.
yes, it was in last Friday's Medfield Press. They've, at 8 o'clock on the 8th, the planning board is having a public meeting on this. And I don't know if this matters or not, but your number 13 here, Mike, is actually part of the public announcement under item number 5.
Yeah.
So there's the inconsistency between the public announcement and this warrant article. I don't know that that matters, I'm just pointing it
I
out.
went to one planning board meeting. I think they did recognize 13 and 5 were duplicates, so they probably fixed that. Bill, thanks for coming, so we know what the meetings are that's going on here in town.
As I said, these aren't, for the most part, these aren't my articles. I take the articles as they give
Yeah,
them to
no,
me.
I was just
as
pointing out
Yeah.
that it's already a public hearing. I mean, if there's any concerns with it, it's.
Coordinator, suicide prevention coordinator, that's a new position. There are new positions proposed in other budgets, so I don't see how you possibly I think we may need, unless something changes, because that article I included on information that showed the financial condition of the state, they're not gonna be able to come up with much money, they're broke.
So my point here is, though, we can't kind of keep relying on free cash as our overall town reserves look good, but that's in part because of the money from the MSBA the last time, which goes away in 2023 when those bonds are paid off. And so the total of our town reserves is going to continue slipping behind if we're going to use money that should be savings to fund ongoing operational expenses.
So then you have to figure out ways to reduce spending, and we seem to be doing everything in the opposite direction.
Well, that's why I'm saying that I haven't seen the budgets yet, so we either have to, obviously, the budgets, in theory, are our budgets, and I know Gus and I have disagreements about this, but I mean, I think before we add any positions in our budgets, we should be talking about whether we should be adding any positions to the budgets that are under our control. We have no control over the school budget. It's pointless to discuss positions in the school department. We have no jurisdiction or authority over the school department. They're gonna do what they're gonna do. But I do think we have to I mean, the problem is that times have been overall pretty good over the last several years.
Yep.
And when the next recession comes and excise taxes on cars drop significantly and the usual fiscal impacts of a recession occur, we'll find ourselves in not as good a position as we could be. And so I think, and I'm not necessarily saying that we should be cutting anything, and maybe we just, but I think we have to face up to the level of our commitments. And yeah, and really square with the taxpayers about what the commitments are and the cost of the services that they're receiving as a town, so they can decide either we're going to take fewer services or we're going to have to find additional funds to raise. I mean, there are ways to get there without an operating override, particularly if we're able to shift more of our capital spending into debt exclusions and move that around and hopefully find some other places for savings. I'm just saying that the economy is pretty good right now, and we should be using this opportunity when the economy is good to build up our reserves, to build up and that includes things like shifting money that's in free cash to the OPEB trust, shifting money that's in free cash to stabilization. All of that is good in terms of building up our reserves. I'm just reacting, we've had been on a pretty good trajectory of reducing the amount of free cash we were using for operating expenses. We used it for some big one-time expenses around the public safety building, but I think we have to get that number back to 500,000, or at least be clear with the people of the town about the consequences of not doing that, that when there is a recession, there will be a need for an operating override or more significant reductions in staffing.
I think the biggest reality check is going to come about a year from now, when people start doing their federal taxes for fiscal 18 and realize how much their federal taxes are going to increase because they've lost a lot of the deductions from the property and income tax. That's when people are going to say, hey, wait a minute. You know, this was one thing when the federal government was picking up a third of the tab or 25% of the tab. But now they're not picking it up anymore, and my tax bill, federal tax bill, just went up by that 25%.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be as much of a wake-up call as you'd hope, though. I mean, I think the number of people who fit in the category who will actually have that impact are pretty small.
Should have seen the lines downstairs
No,
last
I
week.
understand, I
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
that, but I think once people look at with the lower rates, the changes to the AMT and the other things, I think a lot of it's going to cancel
They
itself
might,
out.
yes.
But I think either way, from a town government perspective, we have to be straightforward with the people of the town about what our
Absolutely, yeah.
long-term liabilities are, what we're going to need to do to own up to those long-term liabilities. And the fact is, we're just going to have to either accept higher taxes or fewer services in order to get ourselves into a better fiscal position. I mean, we're in an okay fiscal position now, but we're not on a track to stay there if we don't exercise discipline either on the revenue or spending side.
Otherwise, we'll end up like the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Right. Or any number of other municipal
Yeah.
and state entities that don't have some of the, I mean, it is ironic, that, you know, the states that are in the best shape on this list have some very favorable demographic and economic trends. I mean, it's no coincidence that the Dakotas are number 2 and number 3 when they've had a
Oil
massive
boom,
boom over
shale.
the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Beginning with a very, very small government and having a massive boom.
Yes, that's a big part. They
Right.
have, and they don't have a lot of long-term obligations because they haven't had public employees.
Right,
So,
right. You have Utah, which is an enormously healthy state. It's one of the few states that's got a kind of a growing youthful population that isn't as old and as sick and as dependent on public services as other populations. And so, you know, same thing with a lot of the other states on the list. So,
Well, one
the
of the
older
problems-
states and the states with more, you know, more generous long-term commitments are naturally near the bottom.
And one of the problems with Massachusetts is 45% of the state budget now is for healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And it's growing faster than just about any other state service, and that's
Well,
unsustainable.
that's the reality. I mean, it's the reality in the private side too, where the growth in the cost of healthcare has crowded out so many gains in wages and other benefits. And that's
Yeah.
the fact that healthcare inflation has been so high for so long explains a lot of this for a lot of these financial problems. And one way or the other, we have to pay those bills, though. So I think just in terms of as we head into this budget season, I think we're at least going to have to do the best we can to limit that usage, but also be clear with the town about what we're doing.
Yes,
And the fact that
I
there's
agree,
a
yeah.
reckoning either on the services side or the
And there has been a trend of going up, using more and more free cash every year for
And
several
so all I'm
years
saying
now.
is that trend was headed down for a while, and I think we need to work very, very hard
Yeah.
to push it down further. So I'll just say this now, as far as budget comes in from town departments, I mean, I would think any additions of new positions, I would like the Board of Selectmen to weigh in on before a budget,
Yeah.
ostensibly one of our budgets, goes forward asking for new positions. But,
It sounds like he's a former warrant committee chairman or something.
Work. Yeah, in reviewing my town meeting file and talking with Mike, I just wanted to bring to your attention that we had long-termed the issue of community preservation. The target was gonna be the state 2018 election. Mike's sense was that there wasn't any real stomach to going forward at this time, particularly in light of I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but particularly in light of the fact that the state contribution has continued to slip. I think it was like 17% this year. But I didn't want you folks to say, hey, you didn't remind us, because it was kind of a long-term strategy.
I continue to be aware of the Community Preservation Act, Mark. Thank you for the reminder.
Okay.
So if we were to put it on the annual town meeting this year, then we would have it approved at the state election in the fall? Is that
It
what
has to
you're
go
saying?
to a regular, either state or annual town election.
So there is a state election this fall.
Right, and that's why it was pushed out before, the committee wasn't ready, and it was kind of timed in with the target at that time in the 2018 state election.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion would be that I see it as just found state money from the match, because we're already spending money for the affordable housing, the open spaces, and the historic preservation, so that.
Nowhere near enough to save money. I mean, if we're gonna cut the rest of the budget by $600,000, then we'd save money. We don't spend anywhere near that amount of money. It's not, I mean, it might be a good thing to do, in the sense that we want to spend more money on these categories of things, but it's not a savings. I mean, we don't spend $600,000 a year on those categories of things.
Well, not every year, but things come along.
We haven't spent that much over 20 years.
The renovation of this building and the library would have qualified. I mean, we have spent those types of monies. We've bought properties, I mean, open space, there are a lot of things that we've spent money on that would have qualified.
When we looked at it the last time, it didn't add up over 20 years. I mean, we wouldn't have made, but I mean, I'm happy to put it on the town meeting as long, but I'm not gonna sell it as a savings to the town. It's a tax increase to spend money on particular designated areas. If we want to raise taxes to spend money in those areas, that's fine. People can decide it. But I don't see any, if you want to lay out some math as to how it's a savings, you know, what we're gonna spend on that's already in the budget, such that we're gonna actually save money, then I'd be happy to look at that. But I've crunched those numbers a number of times. I've never seen anything to suggest that we'll save money on it. I mean, it may be good to do. I mean, you get some benefit out of it. I like all of the things that are in the categories, but, you know, given the burden on the taxpayers already, you know, it seems like an added cost with a modest benefit. But I think the honest way to sell it is based on the benefits of spending those monies, not as a savings. Unless you could, I'm happy to be persuaded otherwise.
Yeah, well, I think for me, that's the reason for doing it. If it's not a savings, then.
Well, if you can show me the math that it works, I can be persuaded.
Well, my marching orders right now are just based on the fact of the warrant closing and starting to finalize things. Do you or don't you want an article on for that purpose?
So my view, as it stands, is no, and I'll give Mike credit for kind of deepening my perspective on the Community Preservation Act. First off, I think his point is correct. This is a tax increase. So there is one way I could see us doing it, because the advantage, I think, Pete, the reason that you like it is that there's, even if it's not 50% match of state money, it's still a source of state money. I would be perfectly open to us reconfiguring our tax structure to where we shift the tax, the equivalent amount that we're currently collecting annually on real estate taxes. We basically run an underride to drive that Prop 2.5 limit down by that amount and shift taxes to the surcharge that's used to generate the funds for community preservation. So if we truly structured it in a way that did not lead to an increase in taxes on people in town, but we reconfigured it so that we were playing the game the way the state would like us to play it in order to give us the matching funds, then at the first blush, that's not a tax increase. We've just restructured our tax structure. It's like I could live with that. Mike has made one other point in the past with the fact that you have to put 10% of the Community Preservation Act funds into, at least 10% into each of several categories. And the point he made, there's 2 points. One is we may not be spending money in all those categories, but you have to put the money in those categories. So if you have 3 categories you're not planning to spend money in, and the state does a 30% match, then they're giving you the money that you didn't need in the first place, but you're still spending the money you've got. And I am sympathetic to that view. The second part of it is something I've always respected with the town, is when we have a need, when there's a legitimate need and it needs funding, the taxpayers step up and they approve the funding for legitimate needs. Mike had made a point, this goes back to warrant committee days for me, but Mike made the point that when you have this bucket of money in several different categories that's just building, at some point in time, people say, gee, look at that bucket of money full of money. We ought to figure out something to do with it. And so to the point that by making the money just sit there, you actually encourage spending that you might not otherwise have made that decision to spend money on. I think that's got a lot of merit to it. Given that we do have several categories that we spend money on, if we really went through the numbers and it showed that, no, we need this money, if we could do the restructuring of the tax to where the amount that we would be collecting out of the Community Preservation Act through the channel we're doing there was offset by an underride, I think then we could look at something, because then we're not raising the taxes.
Yep, unless you're harvesting the state match, I wouldn't mind doing that.
Yeah, so I mean, if again, I'm open-minded on it, if you can show me the math. I've just never been able to get the math to work as a savings, just the way we spend money in town. And we, you know, when I think of a 3% increase in taxes, the categories set aside by the, you know, we have plenty of open space in town. You know, we could use some recreational stuff. We get a lot of recreational opportunities. We've got money set aside for affordable housing. Ideally, we won't have to use it all. You know, if you're going to raise taxes by 3%, there's a lot better things that we can spend it on than those things. That's kind of where it comes down to for me, that if you're going to ask more from the taxpayers, you know, we've got a lot of very substantial long-term liabilities that we need to address. We've got $42 million or $50 million of capital. You know, maybe you can use some of the CPA funds for the buildings that are historic for our buildings, but I don't know. I think that from a priority standpoint, I would put those things below some other stuff.
So Mark, I think if you're looking for guidance tonight, then Mike and I probably come out the same way, that we shouldn't move ahead. But between now and the deadline, if there's a argument to be made, we can, I'm happy to listen to it.
Yeah, and I'm also happy to put it on the warrant, right? I mean, I'm not going to keep it off the warrant. If you think we should, to give the town meeting a chance to weigh in and vote on it, I'm happy to put it on the warrant. Like, I'm not saying don't put it on the warrant.
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
saying I won't be in favor of it, and I won't. You know, I will, unless the math is explained to me differently. I won't. You know, I'll disagree with the view that it's going to save people money.
All right, well, I would suggest that we put it on the warrant then.
Yeah, I mean, I have no objection to letting the legislative body of the town have a chance to weigh in on this, and if people want it, that's fine. I suspect they won't, but, you know, it's up to them, so.
So next item on our agenda then is discussion update on Lot 3 Hinckley property.
Should
Let
we
me,
have a
let me just
vote?
be clear, if it's on the warrant, how does it get who's the sponsor?
Well, if the Board of Selectmen would be this one.
If two of the selectmen currently are against it, then I don't think it is.
Well, if two of the selectmen vote to put it on the warrant, you can be against
Okay,
it, put it on the
okay.
warrant, I guess, so.
All right, okay.
So,
Right.
but you need to take, I would suggest, given the discussion, you take a vote whether to put it on the warrant or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to put it on the warrant. I mean, I suspect I'll be against it at town meeting, but I'm not against letting people have a chance to vote on it. I mean, it's, yeah.
Well, is there still a committee?
There's still a committee, but I don't know what they're doing.
I don't know what they're doing either.
I don't think they've been active.
Yeah.
I suppose you could say if they felt that strongly, they would have been back in here lobbying.
Well, you know, there's some issues that are going on there too, I think.
Did we vote? Did you vote?
I don't think we need to vote. We're just, Mike and I have said that it should be put on.
Okay. So it's by a 2-to-1 majority of voting to put it
Are you
on?
opposed to putting it on the
Yeah,
warrant, guys?
yeah, for the reason, Bill, I have a major objection when an article shows up at one town meeting, it gets voted down. It's like, oh, we're gonna put it on the next town meeting. We're gonna keep putting it on until we finally get a bunch of people in the room, they're gonna pass it. This has been up before the town. Two of us have said we don't see the merits, but we're gonna put it on again, and I'm philosophically against just putting the same article on again and again and again.
It's been
until
more
it
than
passes.
10 years since it's been on, though.
I don't think so.
I mean,
Not 10 years.
It was the meeting that was held in the gymnasium, whatever that was. Not the gym, in the auditorium.
So, I mean, but the short answer is
I
the
think it
two
was
of you,
2000.
the two of you can vote for it. I'll vote against it. It'll be 2-to-1. Mike, you and I both, at this point, speak against it. I'd rather speak against it and be consistent in my voting, but I appreciate the desire to let the voters speak. You almost persuaded me to just kind of get on it. It's just, this is repeated.
I mean, my memory is it came up in 2006, because I remember the first time this came up with the warrant committee, I went back and went through all of the things since then to see what would have happened going forward from 2006. Christine and I had worked on it to see, how much was spent and whether it would have saved us any money. It would not have from that time. That's why 2006 sticks out.
Yeah, so,
Well, always been on there. It's always been withdrawn. So the selectmen.
Right.
yeah, that's fair, yeah.
It's appeared.
Yeah,
It's
that's
appeared on
true,
a draft
that's true.
warrant and then been withdrawn in advance. So I think the last town meeting vote was 2006. Would be my memory of when I looked at it. So, I mean, the meals tax came up again probably within 5 years of its original rejection. So I mean, it's not unheard of to resurrect things. So as I said,
Yep. So if you guys have already done that work about things that it could have been spent on, can you share that with us? So the next thing is the then update on Lot 3 in Hinckley. Do you guys have things that you want to talk about with that, or?
I don't think so.
I
I think I already gave you the update on the, excuse me, the work that, I put this on there to give you an update on the work that the Community Opportunities Group is doing on the article. That was my.
I have one, this is just a comment, and it's really, Steve, I know Steve Nolan's out of town. I've been, and Pete, I think this you can listen to and react to it without, because it's not specific to the lots. I was reacting after Steve came in at our last meeting and made the case for 40R. And basically said, well, I actually think 40R would make the land more valuable than it would be if it was 40B or something else, because it's basically, the developer would know that it's even more expedited in terms of permitting than 40B would be. And then and that made an impression on me. It was like, okay, well, if that's going to add value to the value of the property that we can get, that makes sense. But I've been mulling it over for 2 weeks, and the place that I'm hanging up on is the second part of his rationale, which is we can make it 40R, and that will make it more valuable to a developer, but we don't have to worry about the implications of 40R because the town owns the property and they can only do what we want them to do on it. And I stepped back and I started thinking about that, and I want to have this conversation with Steve. That logically doesn't make sense to me, that you have 40R, so the developer says this is worth more, but we own the property and we're going to tell you what you can do on it. It's like an ethereal advantage because the town is still going to control it whether it was 40R or not.
Well, but the town, when they're disposing of it to you, they're telling you what they want you to do. What's coming out of the equation with the 40R is the permitting process, which is the uncertainty, I think, and the sooner you can, because that permitting process under the other types of zoning are gonna take longer. Time is money. There's also uncertainty in those, so that's gonna be a risk that's gonna
So this is the
lower your
piece,
value.
okay, so that's the piece I have to get my arms wrapped around as being a real meaningful thing, and perhaps it is, it's not my area of
Look at
expertise.
40R as essentially trumping zoning.
Well, but not if, what we said was, but the developers can't do anything we don't want them to do anyway.
Right, but if we, the town, agree, and you've got the 40R in place, then you're not gonna get held up with,
Disposition.
oversight with either the, zoning board or the planning board.
Okay.
It's gonna go through, provided the town as landowner agrees.
So okay, I hear it, I want to still mull it over, but I get it. The second piece of that ties back to what I was talking about before in Hinckley, with the whole point I was making around not having be the entire lot, and this is a point I'll make back with the master planning committee. If the Hinckley property is zone 40R, the Hinckley property is zone 40R, and senior and affordable housing is put up on a piece of it, but the other piece of it is a buildable lot that maybe is contiguous to other potential property we could bundle it with, and that's zoned 40R, and it's, in other words, that lot would be sold. That's not land the town is maintaining control over. That's an asset that the town would sell. We have to be very careful what we put in the 40R envelope and what we don't put in the 40R envelope, or you could wind up with a 40R zoned back lot plus whatever appended property might be there, that somebody could come in and say, I don't want to put a single family house there, I want to put X, and it's 40R and I can do it.
And I have the other concern. Do you trust the state not to change the terms of 40R when they do not allow you to get out of 40R without their permission?
I mean, Steve answered that as well, Mike, which is that we've got a disposition agreement as the owner of the property that specifies what the buyer has to do with it, so.
I don't buy this disposition agreement, because all you need is the market conditions to change and the developer to come back and say, I'm going bankrupt, I'm losing my shirt, and, I need this or I need that. And what are you gonna do? You're gonna tell them no? So you're gonna renegotiate the land disposition agreement. It's not like it's cast in concrete.
Or the composition of the board should change, and they could say,
Sure.
well, we'll change the disposition
I mean,
agreement,
it's only
so.
temporary. I mean, I sit here and I listen to McCabe say things like, for example, well, I say, this is not in the land disposition agreement with the state for the hospital property. We'll go back and renegotiate it. Well, if it works on that end, it works, I guess it works the other way too, doesn't it? So, I mean, a land disposition agreement is only as good as the market conditions, the environment that you're currently in, and may bear no relation to where you were when you signed the land disposition agreement. I mean, it's.
In my experience, the larger the projects, the more complex, the longer they're gonna take to develop, the more problematical they
Right.
become. Because when you go to do them, you put all the language in the world, but if you don't have some surety for performance, and the very kinds of surety for performance, the developer will tell you, no, 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 I can't have that because my lenders won't permit it, which is largely like mortgages or things like that. And they immediately say, no, you can't have that, so they take that off the table, and so now you're going on the basis of a handshake and good faith and all that sort of thing, and they're very problematical.
Walk away and leave a hole in the ground. How many developers have threatened that?
It's happened.
in towns?
I can point you to projects where it's happened. Actually, the whole downtown Quincy redevelopment, which was originally gonna be brilliant, fell apart, and they managed to resurrect it several years later when the economy turned around, and,
Westwood Station look anything like it was gonna look
right,
20 years ago? or
Another
15
example.
years ago?
So anyway, I just wanted to share the comments. Again, I've been struggling with that for 2 weeks now. And there's this, I'm just not smart enough to totally assess all the explanations. And it's still keeping
my
me
experience,
away.
not that I'm an expert, but my experience with 40R has been that it works best when you're using it as essentially spot zoning. You find a developer, you have a very specific project in mind, you then craft the 40R to suit that and pass it after you've already got the agreement with the developer, as opposed to putting a 40R in place in advance and then getting stuck with these various worst-case scenarios that have been raised.
Under our pending items, town administrator evaluation process. Mike's tonight given us his
Yes, he did.
goals for the rest of this fiscal year, so through June.
Is that new? Or is it the
Yeah, he
same one?
updated them since the last meeting.
First shelf, oh, here, right here, right there.
So I'm gonna pass out 4 copies here. I come prepared for Mike on these things. Let's pass those out. Here's a copy from you. Mike, I have reactions to the goals.
By the way, I tried to follow your 5-point plan.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah.
I did notice that. In the interest of time, I won't, if you can look at my comments. Most of the comments that I had, there's a bunch that I checked off. There's a few that I made comments on, probably having more to do with emphasizing what the output would be, as opposed to not agreeing with the goal. The ones that probably are, now, I was looking at this as goals you were proposing for this fiscal year, as opposed to an existing set of goals that you've been working to and you're just updating. So the conversation I was thinking of is, what do you need, what do I think you ought to be looking at accomplishing? The ones at the bottom are the only ones I want to draw your attention to, and actually everybody's. The first one is rationalizing the responsibilities and budgets for grounds maintenance. Maybe this is an FY19 goal, so I'm not trying to force this, but the whole idea of Parks and Rec handling certain stuff and Highway Department handling other certain stuff and Roberta cutting her own grass, that whole thing needs to get sorted out and fixed. And it's not an emergency, but it's just a dumb way that we do business in this town. The second one, initiating a process to develop greater cohesion among town department heads. This one came out of, and I don't know how to tell you how to exactly do it, but it came out of the discussions that I had with the VSO, where I basically was talking to department heads saying, you know, we got a town problem here. And it's not that I'm expecting anyone to just suck it up and solve it. It's that, you know, when do you guys come together as department heads to deal with the town's problems and figure out how you can collaboratively solve them? And the answer I got was, well, we never do that. So it's like, I think there's an opportunity there. The third one, actually, I had a stronger view until I realized that that fall cleanup was not something that had already been done, and we were being asked to rubber stamp it after the fact. But it ties a little bit into the ClearGov discussion we had in the
And
last
that
one.
one didn't come through on your
Oh,
copy, so if you could just read us
okay.
what you got there.
Yeah, so the third one was to review the overall town contracting processes to identify areas of weakness. In fact, if you don't have that on yours, pass that one down to Mike and give me a copy, because I'll remember what it is. I do not want to bureaucratize procurement, so let me be very clear about that. But there's times in this town, ever since I first became involved with the warrant committee, that contracts get let just because somebody knows, you know, a department head knows somebody that they liked when they were working in another town somewhere else and they brought them in. Maybe that's a great idea, but without kind of some basic principles around how you contract, you know, being clear about what it is you want, making sure that you've looked at alternatives and you have criteria around how you do it, you wind up with a less than optimal contracting process, in my experience. So,
Are you talking about preparation of the RFP as opposed, because I mean, contracts, most contracts, you have to go out to bid, and there's a whole.
but not all.
purchasing
Yeah,
process.
and partly I was thinking that I was getting, you know, after the fact, approved 17,500 for fall cleanup that took place in November. So it's like, what is this? And as I said, I'm not trying to
Fall cleanup
bureaucratize.
was a prospective event in January?
And
Next
so
fall.
I'm not, this is not a message around, let's make this bureaucratic and cumbersome. It's more a matter of if, for instance, if there is a sole source procurement, people in town ought to be able to explain, the ones that want to have that procurement, they should be able to explain why it's appropriate for that to be a sole source. The thing we had to compete to get the extra CBI time, that's something, in my view, we should have been able to sole source. You can't because the contracting laws don't allow you to. But the market understood, if you write it the right way and you make it clear that this is a continuation of something that's been going on for 2 years, that's gonna go for another 3 months, nobody out there is gonna say, hey, let me have a crack at that one.
We actually did have another firm who
Really?
had some interest in it, so I
All
will.
right. Well, I've overestimated the intellect of people in the market. But, so I'm not, what I'm getting at is, I'm not trying to bureaucratize it, but there's a few places where I've seen that I think it's just people decide that they're gonna they're gonna do something, and, at some level, people should be able to do that. You know, it's, at some contracting level, it's probably correct, but, so the point wasn't to tell you what to do, it's just a suggestion to think about it, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So in terms of, so that Mike's got his annual, or his half-a-year goals now. And I guess I thought that as a board, we should probably go back and review his last goals and see how he did on those, even though I know we had some discussion about that. So we just hadn't come up with it. I had sent around some methodology for doing that.
I did write up what I thought I had accomplished in fiscal 17. I've got it about 2/3 done. I'll finish that up for the
All right.
next time I give it to you,
All
so.
right.
And it goes into a lot of the points for the prior year, what actually was done last
Okay,
year.
good, good.
I did note, Mike, that you included on here, under continue to find and employ good department heads and employees, employment turnover accelerates, you included the town administrator.
Yes. Well, I'll be 72 in March, so
I know.
it'll go on
I
forever,
think,
yes, yes.
You know, depending on,
And the police chief turned 65 in a year and a half, so, you know, you have to
I would
take these
think
things into
one
account.
goal at some point when, you know, when you think that turnover is gonna occur, would develop a transitional plan, as part of that. And I think that we ought to talk through kind of mechanically what that looks like, because it's not, you know, it's not a normal transition.
Right, yeah.
That you're the only person who's ever held the job, and if you were to leave like on a Friday and, you know,
So Mark, do we need another article for a bylaw change that you can't leave
I'd be
until
more
you've got a
likely
fully
not to show up
qualified
on a
replacement?
Monday morning than
Right,
leave on a
right.
Friday, so.
Right, there'd be a fair amount of work to do there.
Now, Chris has been, what have you been here, 18, 19 years now?
My God.
So she's
A
gaining on
lifetime.
it, yeah. She didn't have kids when she started here, and now her oldest son is going to college.
Crazy.
But just kind of on that piece of it, that
Yeah.
would probably be worth putting together, and just the timing of it, you know, timing wise, it'd be better. The fire chief search now, and then a police chief search at the end of 2019. Rather than have to do two of them at once.
Yeah.
Probably be
You may end up with that, yeah.
better. Right, I mean, 'cause, I don't know, Pete and Gus, what you think about it, it'd be better not to be doing two big searches at once. or two
Yeah.
big transitions.
Ideally, yeah.
You know, it might be an appropriate time to look at the functions of the town administrator as whether you want to continue the way it is now, or you want to go to a stronger town administrator, almost a town manager type of situation which a number of communities do. So,
It's pretty strong.
Is there-
First step on the road to becoming city.
Does that make the job more appealing to somebody if it's a
Yes.
strong town administrator?
It's the same thing as like
Not
a
necessarily.
professional sports team, to make the analogy, where you have control of your personnel and all.
I think to a certain extent, it is the reputation of the community that makes the big factor in who applies for the job. There are certain communities that have reputations of hiring and firing and hiring and firing and having difficult boards to deal with.
The average tenure is low. It's like 3 years or 7 or something. It's very low.
Well, the average tenure in Medfield is what, 42 years?
Yes. No, average with 4. Fred
Oh my God,
Conn was
I'm
here
halfway
4
there.
years, so before I get, yeah, so,
So an average,
yes.
So, next is the annual appointments. The only thing that I know that we were holding on that was the Board of Health.
With the holidays and everything, and the administrative assistant for the Board of Health is out of the office right now, so when she returns, I'll be able to
Veteran
follow
Service
up with her.
Officer, anything on that?
Mike, did you have an update on the veteran services?
Yes, I've been negotiating a contract with a neighboring town, and they are agreeable to a 2/3, 1/3 split. I sent,
We're
they
the
sent.
1/3, by the way.
The what?
We're the 1/3. They're the
1/3,
2/3.
yes, yeah. The agent they have has worked with our former veterans agent, who highly recommended him. In fact, they traded places with each other. Mark had some concern with the contract that they submitted. He wanted to change some of the word, to add wording stating that the employee, that the Veterans Service agent would in no way be considered an employee of the town of Medfield.
The draft sounded like the town, it sounded like the way the wording of that contract was that the other town was anxious to make it clear that that was true as well.
Yeah, I just was attempting to clarify, went off a couple of other agreements I'd had with intermunicipals where it's clear that it's more, it's not between the towns as much as it's alerting the employee that you have to deal with the host community, if you will, for your employment, your compensation, all, don't come to us. All we're doing is paying your town. So that was the only reason. I didn't expect that Walpole would object. I've dealt with their counsel, but.
We weren't supposed to mention the town.
we'll have Rachel.
Delete that, yes, yes.
We'll bleep that out when that comes up.
The Rachel 18-minute gap, 18-second gap.
We'll censor that portion.
It's the good thing about, the good thing about meetings that last more than 3 hours. Nobody lasts this
Okay, we
long.
have Article 90 minutes ago, Article 9.
My only concern was we were the town that was approached them, and I didn't want to act as if we were saying, okay, but we're going to do this on our terms, and you're going to take all the responsibility. And then Joy raised some interesting questions of what do we do about, now, I understand he doesn't take town benefits. But Joy said, what about pension? Should we pay a portion of pension costs or OPEB costs?
Not our employee,
What?
not our employee.
Right.
I think the wording, though, in the draft talked about compensation and benefits costs. Yeah, if I recall the way it's worded, where it sets out that split. I think that the draft refers to compensation and benefits.
Says the agent's salary and benefits will be paid by, Medfield agrees to pay to the amount of X per month.
Okay, so it does include some benefits, so we'll have to
Assumed, yeah.
calculation.
I mean, it's appropriate, but.
Yeah. Okay,
The only question, and I don't think it would show up in the contract, the only question I had, I assume that when we pay benefit, you know how when we pay benefits, we get reimbursed by the state for at least a portion of the benefits we pay. The contract is silent on how that works, which probably is right. It's just that I found myself wondering, so how does it work? We'll still presumably pay benefits. Maybe the state just sends us, like, how do we put a claim in, or do they
The
automatically?
agent acts as the agent, he matches the person with the benefits they're entitled to,
Okay.
and then you're paying it out and then getting reimbursed if it's your.
But what triggers
resident.
so my point was, how does that reimbursement get triggered? Does he put in the report?
According to that, it's by the monthly bill. Monthly bill satisfies your obligation, I
Yeah,
would
but
think.
what's the mechanism right now for getting reimbursement when we pay out for a veteran? I'm not even sure what it is.
When we pay out for what?
I mean, if we pay veterans benefits, what's the mechanism logistically to get reimbursed by the state?
We apply, there's forms the veterans agent fills out, and for the community that is the responsible party for paying the benefits, and then they send you a reimbursement check periodically.
So it's part of his duties.
We just should be
Yeah.
clear. I'm only sensitive because the ALS Study Committee, one of the things about outsourcing is that the outsourced companies, they give you the price, but they also, they retain the ambulance fees. And so I'm in this mindset of, don't lose track of the fees or the reimbursements that come back in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and with Mark, and we'll come up with a definitive agreement, and he can start anytime now,
Great.
that he's able to, and I guess Ron is in Florida now so we need to get somebody on board. There are a few things pending. Somebody inquired about applying for reimbursement of the Valor Act, and a couple of people have inquired about cemetery markers, so.
Okay, we've got the licenses and permits, a consent agenda, which is just one item, a liquor license for a wedding in May at Rocky Woods. Why do we have any?
Do we need, this came up before, they're not selling the liquor, so do they need a liquor license?
I'll let Mark answer.
I'm
not our
sorry.
land.
It's an interesting case because they're having a private wedding, and Rocky Woods would like them. They don't normally allow liquor to be consumed on site. They're allowing it for this event if she has a license from the town, a one-day permit. But Mark has said that she doesn't need a permit, as we've discussed before, so I'm just trying to help her.
Although I don't know what the bylaw is without looking at it, but it's not unusual to have a bylaw that prohibits public consumption of alcohol except at licensed events, so in that sense, and just to keep a handle on what's going on out there, there's really no downside to doing it.
Depending on whether
It's a
it's,
small family wedding, the alcohol is being provided by the family, it's not catered, it's not a large affair.
it's not a cash bar.
No feeding the wildlife.
Yeah, which can maybe helps with the beaver problem.
Drunk beaver.
What a beaver strike.
They can't hold their liquor. I move that we grant the permit for the one-day liquor license at Rocky Woods Wedding.
Second.
All those in favor? Yep. Anything else? Selectmen's reports? Town administrator update first, I
You
guess.
skipped over the townwide goals distribution. If you have anything to report, Christine?
No, with the holidays since our last
Okay.
meeting, I haven't
So
done
it was
anything.
wise of you to skip over the townwide goals
yeah.
distribution.
Sorry to miss it. Town administrator update, Mike.
Just a couple of things. Over the weekend, we had a incident involving a basketball at the high school basketball court where a youngster threw a basketball court up and hit a sprinkler head and broke it off, and water flooded the basketball court, which had just been refinished recently.
Was this during the game or?
No, it was a practice Saturday morning.
High school practice?
Yeah, and according to Jerry, it could be repaired because it was isolated to a strip in the center because the way the rafters run and whatnot. When I talked to the superintendent, his attitude was we ought to redo the whole court because the insurance will cover it, which kind of bothers me a little bit, but, you know, he said it won't look as good and it won't be the same level if they sand the middle, just the middle down. So I don't know whether he's talking about sanding the whole floor down or relaying the whole floor or what, but, you know, it seems to me that whatever we pay out in insurance claims comes back in the long run in our rates. Now, granted, it's spread over a large number of communities, but if everybody acted, you know, if everybody did that, our rates would skyrocket. So he said the appraiser was out and said the insurance would cover it. But I guess there'll be a difference over what the appropriate level of repair work is, whether it's replacement of all or a portion of the court. And all of the court, my understanding, could be about $400,000.
Thanks.
How long is it gonna be out of commission?
It'll be out for at least a week. They've had to move all the games, so probably longer. So I suppose it depends on how long they get an agreement with the appraiser as to what level of work's gonna be done. But, the other incident that happened Sunday was a pipe froze in the cafeteria of the middle school and burst. And fortunately, in that case, the damage was limited because there were floor drains in the cafeteria floor, so the water was able to drain out instead of flooding. Jerry thought we probably would lose an oven, or maybe it was Mike, I guess, Mike LaFrancesca thought we'd lose an oven, we'd lose a few ceiling tiles, and they had to bring a company in to do the cleanup and whatnot. And so that will be far less damaging, even though it could have the potential, if there hadn't been floor drains, the potential could have been enormous. So we lucked out on that one and didn't on the other one. So, there is a question as to whether the things were covered, the sprinkler heads. And I've heard both versions. I've heard one version where it said it wasn't covered, and I've heard another version where it was covered, so who knows? But those two things happen. The other thing is the latest word on the storm is, 6 to 12 inches with heavy winds and potentially a lot of, there could be potentially tree damage and power lines down.
So when I was driving here tonight, it was 8 to 12.
8 to 12, it depends on where the dividing line is.
It's gonna be 10 to 16 by morning. We have a storm, we're gonna do a storm safety meeting at 11 o'clock tomorrow at the Public Safety Building. And his concern actually more than the snow is gonna be the power outages and the extreme cold.
Yeah.
Look at what we're gonna do for shelter options.
They've been projecting high winds right along, no matter what way the snow goes.
And some of the MEMA reports I've read are more worried about the wind damage than they are about the snow. It depends where they are. I guess the worst is expected to be out the Outer Cape. But then there's, depending on where the rain-snow line sets up, there could be heavy snow as opposed to the light, fluffy stuff. So and they don't exactly know where the rain snow lines want to fall, so it's a potential tough one, so.
The storm itself doesn't exist right now.
Yes,
all gonna
it
come
was.
together.
It's merging, yeah.
Ontogenesis.
Yes, yeah. The other problem,
It's a great word.
Yeah.
yes, yeah. I
That's
like
the
that
extent of
word.
my knowledge of it, but that was the term, ontogenesis.
The other problem is the weather after the storm is turning bitterly cold. I mean, they're talking about a high of 5 degrees and a low of -13 for Friday night and Saturday. So, you know, this could potentially be a lot more frozen pipes.
Rachel, don't worry. They say once anything below -12, you can't tell the difference.
So, that's the good news is there's only 78 more days till spring.
The weather report from the town administrator, thank you.
What did that damn groundhog does on February 2nd?
Yeah.
So do we have any selectmen's reports, Mike?
So the only one that I have, just to note, next Tuesday night at the Public Safety Building, the Affordable Housing Trust Board is meeting. The meeting's going to begin at 6:30 with an update from the Director of the Medfield Housing Authority on the Tilton Village project. But then at 7 o'clock, we will have a public meeting with John Kelly, who will be presenting his proposals for a development on the DPW side of Dale Street. The renderings of his proposals will be posted on the town website sometime this week. So
And that's at Public Safety, did you
that's
say?
in the Public Safety Building in the big conference room on the first floor.
Great.
He's had a couple of meetings with neighbors and with the MRA group and has taken some of their feedback. And so I think he's still planning to present 2 different options, one of which would be all rental and one of which would be a mixture of rental and ownership housing. So both in the kind of mid-30s number of units. So that's next Tuesday.
All right. Gus?
I don't think I have anything. Christine, I owed you an answer on the MMA conference. I'm not going to go to either of the dinners, so.
Okay, but the conference will be there. for you.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
then all 3 of you are registered and ready to go.
Great, okay. Yeah, I don't think I've had a chance to get in any mischief in the last couple of weeks.
So I just mentioned that I've got office hours coming up on Friday this week at the center, if anybody wants to talk 9 to 10. And
Except for us, we can't come and talk to you.
right, except you guys. So talk now. And then the other thing I would just mention, Gus, is after our 6-town selectmen meeting that you and I attended,
That's right.
I actually had someone talk to me about the issues of the problem of regulating who lives in the affordable housing in Medfield.
Is that right?
And there were people that had won the lottery apparently, and there are people that were not age appropriate for developments, and so that was the whole issue that the Medfield, or Medway selectmen were bringing up to us at that meeting, so.
That was a good meeting. I appreciate, I don't know who prompted that. I know we heard from Sean Dooley's aide, so I think that's how the connection was made.
It was interesting to me because I realized afterwards that I had been to some meetings with some of those people before, and so somehow we'd just fallen off their list.
What was good to hear was they were talking about their 40Bs that have been up and running for a while.
Nobody's
And some of the
administering them.
abuse, and basically, yeah, with a lot of these, you have these small developments. The condo association doesn't track, and so you wind up with people that are effectively abusing the system, even to the point of getting a unit, taking out a market rate mortgage on it, and then just leaving. I mean, there's a whole lot of pitfalls after you get these things up and running around how particularly, I think, for the smaller ones.
Yeah. That's why some of the towns have hired a person to administer the affordable units to check and make sure they're being complied with.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the state can pull them off your list and you lose credit for them.
But for home ownership, there's no monitoring for home ownership after it's purchased.
Yeah,
unless it's
except on the
refinanced.
except on the resale. Yeah. When the auction is when, the lottery, is that next week?
Yeah, it's coming up, I don't have the date written down in front of me, but it's coming up.
And the Larkin brothers haven't started that lottery process yet, have they? For their development?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a long ways away. Yeah. What's called it just started his lottery about a month ago, and it,
Yeah. I mean,
Borelli.
Borelli's process.
yeah. Have they picked the tenants yet for the affordable units?
No, that'll be the lottery that's coming up.
Oh, that's the one that's coming out.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
The other ones are all rented, right?
Yeah, all the market rates are rented.
Yeah, correct. Oh, they
There's
are.
quite a waiting list.
Wow.
Nice looking building.
Could I raise just one, because I've had this in the back of my notebook since, I think, 2 meetings ago. We had an informational thing on the MAPC 495 Metro West Partnership, and they were looking, I read it a month ago now, but they were looking for interest on the parts of towns to participate or something. I'm just curious to that, anything?
Chris used to be on the board of directors.
I'm still on the board, I'm just not on the executive committee.
But
okay.
was there anything in here that we should have, we didn't talk about it, because I think it was that long meeting we had. Is there anything in here that we should talk about at some point? No.
I don't think, not at this
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I can take it out of my book.
So we're done then.
All right.
We're done.
Great, thank you.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV.